Hello everyone, and welcome back to Nightmare Narratives. I can picture some of you already in bed, maybe some of you just getting home from work. Wherever you are, whatever time it is, I'm glad you're here. If this helps you relax or sleep, please like and subscribe. It means a lot. Now let's get you comfortable and I'll tell you tonight's story. My name is Miranda Stillwater, and I've been a ranger on the Blue Ridge Parkway for 14 years. Long enough to know every trail, every overlook, every hidden valley where the fog settles like a blanket. Long enough to stop being surprised by what tourists do. The selfies on cliff edges, the bear encounters, the ones who think flip-flops are hiking boots. But I never thought rocks could sing. My mama's family came from these mountains, way back. Appalachian people through and through. She used to tell me stories about the Cherokee who lived here before the soldiers came. Said the mountains remember everything. I nodded along like kids do, never really believing. I wish I'd listened better. It started in March of 1981, right when the weather was turning. I was up near Grandfather Mountain doing my usual rounds, checking trail conditions, looking for winter damage. The radio on my hip crackled. "Miranda, you there?" It was Bobby at the ranger station. "Yeah, I'm here." "We got another one." Hikers reported hearing music up by the granite outcrops. Said it was beautiful, but there's nobody up there with instruments. I sighed. This was the third call like this in 2 weeks. Probably just whined through the rocks. You know how it sounds sometimes. That's what I told them, but Miranda, they seemed real shook up about it. I promised to check it out. The granite outcrops were ancient formations, huge stones balanced on the mountainside like some giant's toys. The Cherokee considered them sacred. I'd documented over 200 sites like this along the parkway, knew their history, their spiritual significance. It was part of my job as cultural resource specialist. The climb took 40 minutes. My boots found the familiar path, muscle memory guiding me through the trees. The air smelled like pine and rain, and the fog was rolling in early. Up here at 4,000 feet, the weather changed fast. That's when I heard it. At first, I thought it was wind, a low humming, like someone blowing across a bottle top. But as I got closer to the outcrops, the sound changed. It became melodic, not random at all. It rose and fell in patterns, like a song without words. My skin prickled. I'm not the type to spook easy. 14 years in these mountains, I'd seen plenty of strange things. Weird lights. People swore were UFOs, always car headlights reflected in the fog. Mysterious howls, coyotes, shadows that seemed to move on their own, trees in wind. Everything had an explanation. But this sound, it was coming from the rocks themselves. I put my hand on the nearest granite outcrop. The stone was warm, which didn't make sense. It was 50 degrees out, and this side faced away from any sun. But the warmth wasn't the weird part. The rock was vibrating, just slightly, like a tuning fork. The humming grew louder. I should have left right then. Should have radioed Bobby and said the hikers were right, something strange was happening. We needed to bring in experts. But 14 years of training told me there had to be a rational explanation. Underground stream causing resonance. Geological pressure, something. I circled the formation, placing my hand on each stone. All of them were warm, all of them humming. And as the fog thickened around me, the sound started to change again. It sounded like voices, not words I could understand, but the rhythm, the way the notes rose and fell. It was like chanting, like a ceremony. My mama's stories bubbled up from memory. Cherokee ceremonies that lasted all night, songs that connected earth and sky. "Hello?" I called out, feeling stupid. "Anyone up here?" The chanting continued. Multiple voices now, harmonizing in ways that shouldn't be possible from wind and stone. That's when I saw him. A man sitting on a rock about 30 feet away, barely visible through the fog. He wasn't moving, just sitting there, facing the largest outcrop, perfectly still. "Hey!" I moved toward him. "Sir, are you okay?" "No." Response. I got closer. He was young, maybe 25, wearing hiking gear. His eyes were open, staring at the rocks. But when I waved my hand in front of his face, he didn't blink. Sir, can you hear me? I touched his shoulder. His skin was cold through his jacket. How long had he been sitting here? I grabbed my radio. Bobby, I need medical up at the granite outcrops. Got an unresponsive hiker. The radio crackled with static. Say again? You're breaking up. Medical assistance, granite outcrops. One hiker, unresponsive. More static. Then nothing. The chanting from the stones grew louder. The young man's lips began to move, but no sound came out. He was mouthing words in time with the music. My training kicked in. I checked his pulse. Steady, but slow. Pupils dilated. No obvious injuries. But something was very wrong. I tried the radio again. Nothing but static. The fog pressed closer. The stones sang. And as I knelt there beside this stranger, trying to figure out what to do, I realized the chanting had words now. I couldn't understand the language, but I could hear them clear as day, rising and falling, calling. The young man suddenly turned his head to look at me. His eyes were blank, empty, but his mouth kept moving, kept forming those silent words. Then he smiled. I stumbled backward. "We've been waiting," he said. But it wasn't his voice. It was deeper, older, and it spoke with the same rhythm as the stones. That's when I ran. I crashed through the fog, half sliding down the trail, my radio clutched in my hand. It wasn't until I got below 3,000 feet that the static cleared and Bobby's voice came through. "Randa? Miranda, come in." "I'm here. I'm okay." I was breathing hard, leaning against a tree. "Send a team up to the outcrops. There's a hiker up there. Something's wrong with him." "What kind of wrong?" How could I explain? "Just send someone. And Bobby, don't go alone." 2 hours later, I sat in the ranger station while Bobby and 3 others brought the young man down on a stretcher. He was still unresponsive, still had that empty look in his eyes. The paramedics rushed him to the hospital in Boone. "What happened up there?" Bobby asked. He'd known me long enough to see I was shaken. "I don't know." It was the truth. He was just sitting there, like he'd been there for hours. And the rocks... The singing? I nodded. "It's real. I heard it. The stones are making sounds they shouldn't be able to make." Bobby scratched his beard. He was 53, been a ranger since the parkway first opened. Seen everything. Weather's been strange. Might be pressure changes, air moving through cracks in the rock. It sounded like voices, Bobby, like people chanting. He didn't say anything for a minute, then, "You know what this area meant to the Cherokee?" "Of course. Sacred sites, ceremony grounds." "My grandmother was Cherokee. She used to say the mountains hold memories, that the rocks remember everything that happened here." He looked uncomfortable. Never put much stock in it myself. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing the chanting, seeing that young man's empty eyes. Around midnight, I gave up and opened my laptop. Started searching. Hikers missing Blue Ridge Mountains. The results made my stomach drop. 12 people in the last 6 months. All disappeared near granite formations in the Grandfather Mountain area. Most were found within a few days, but the details were strange. Each one had been discovered sitting near a cliff edge or rock formation, completely unresponsive, like the man I'd found. I clicked through news articles. Hiker found catatonic. Mystery illness strikes mountain visitors. Experts baffled by strange cases. All of them had been near sites I knew were sacred to the Cherokee. Pulled out my notes from years of documentation. The outcrops where I'd found the young man, I'd marked it as a ceremony site based on artifacts found nearby. The other locations where hikers had been found, sacred sites, every single one. My phone rang. Bobby. The hospital called. The hiker's name is David Brennan, college student from Virginia. He's awake, but... Bobby paused. They're saying he's got some kind of brain damage. His scans show weird electrical activity. And Miranda, he's the 12th one. I know, I've been reading about it. There's something else. They want to send a specialist, not a doctor, a geologist. Guy named William Rockford. Apparently, he's been studying acoustic phenomena in rock formations. The hospital called him because of what the hikers kept saying before they went silent. What did they say? They said the stones were calling their names. Dr. William Rockford arrived 2 days later. He was 45, tall and thin, with the kind of sharp eyes that missed nothing. He carried cases of equipment and an expression that said he didn't believe in anything he couldn't measure. Ranger Stillwater. He shook my hand. I understand you heard these sounds firsthand. I did. And you found the latest victim? I didn't like him calling David Brennan a victim, but it fit. Yes. Good. I'll need you to take me to the exact location. I want to set up monitoring equipment, run some tests. This is likely a natural phenomenon. Infrasound, perhaps, or electromagnetic interference affecting the brain. But the pattern is interesting. 12 cases in 6 months, all in the same general area. There's something specific about these rock formations. We hiked up the next morning, me and Rockford and Bobby. The geologist had us carrying heavy cases of equipment. He talked the whole way, explaining theories about subsonic frequencies and acoustic resonance. I half listened. My attention was on the sounds of the forest. The birds had gone quiet. Dr. Rockford, I said as we neared the outcrops, be careful up here. Whatever this is, there's a rational explanation for everything, Ranger, I assure you. That's what I'd thought too. 2 days ago. The fog was back, thick as cotton. We could barely see 10 feet ahead, but we could hear the humming. Even Bobby, who'd been skeptical, stopped in his tracks. That's not wind, he said quietly. Rockford pulled out a device that looked like a fancy microphone. He moved around the stones, watching numbers on a display. His expression changed from confident to confused to something like fear. This is impossible, he muttered. What is? The frequency. It's coming from inside the rock. Solid granite doesn't produce sound like this. It can't. He looked at me. How long has this been happening? The report started 6 months ago, but that doesn't mean... 6 months ago was the spring equinox. A new voice. We all turned. An old man stood at the edge of the fog. Cherokee, maybe 70 years old, with long gray hair and dark eyes that seemed to look right through us. I hadn't heard him approach. Who are you? Bobby asked. Joseph Crow Feather. I'm here because the ancestors sent me. He looked at the stones. You're disturbing something that should have been left alone. Rockford looked annoyed. Sir, this is a scientific investigation. Science won't help you understand what's happening here. Joseph moved closer. His voice was gentle but firm. These are the stones that remember pain. Our people bound their voices here during the forced removal, in 1838 when the soldiers came to march us west. The medicine men performed a ceremony to keep our spirits tied to this land, to wait until we could return. My skin went cold. The Trail of Tears started here? One of the departure points, yes. Thousands of our people gathered in these mountains before the march west. Thousands who never saw their homeland again. Joseph placed his hand on one of the stones. The Medes, sign men knew what was coming. So they created a way for the ancestors to remain, to wait. They bound their voices in the stone. That's not possible, Rockford said, but his voice wavered. The stones are singing because our people are waking up. They're calling the Cherokee home, but the world has changed. Modern people come near and the ancestors try to connect with them, but it's like trying to pour an ocean into a cup. The human mind breaks. The humming grew louder. In the fog around us, I started to see shapes. Vague at first, but becoming clearer. People, dozens of them, walking slowly through the mist. Bobby grabbed my arm. You seeing this? I was. Men, women, children, all moving toward the stones. Their faces were sad, so sad. And they were looking at us, through us. Rockford had gone pale. His device beeped frantically. The readings, this is... One of the figures moved closer to him. An old woman, wearing traditional Cherokee clothing. She reached out her hand. The geologist screamed. Rockford collapsed. Bobby and I grabbed him before he hit the rocks, dragging him backward away from the stones. The figures in the fog watched, but didn't follow. "We need to get him down," I said. Joseph Crowfeather stood calmly, as if none of this surprised him. "The ancestors are strongest at the ceremony sites. The stones amplify their presence." "Why are they doing this?" My voice came out sharper than I meant. I was scared, and anger felt safer than fear. "They don't mean harm. They're trying to come home." Joseph looked at the unconscious geologist. "But bridging past and present, it's not meant for everyone. This one has a strong mind. He might survive the connection." "Survive?" Bobby's voice cracked. "What do you mean, survive?" We didn't wait for an answer. Bobby and I carried Rockford down the mountain, leaving the equipment behind. Joseph followed silently. The whole way down, I could hear the singing. It followed us like a shadow. At the ranger station, we laid Rockford on a couch. His eyes were moving behind his closed lids, like he was dreaming, or watching something. Every few seconds, his lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. "Hospital?" Bobby suggested. "They can't help him," Joseph said. "He's not sick. He's connecting." "Connecting to what?" "To the ones who died on the march, to their memories, their pain, their knowledge." Joseph sat down across from the unconscious man. "It happened to the others too. The ancestors reached out trying to share their story. But modern minds aren't prepared. They break under the weight of so much history, so much grief." I thought about David Brennan in the hospital, about the 11 others before him. Can they recover? Some will, some won't. It depends how deep the connection goes. Rockford's eyes snapped open, but they weren't his eyes anymore. They were darker, older, full of an intelligence that didn't belong to the 45-year-old geologist. "Osio," he said. "Hello in Cherokee." Bobby took a step back. I stayed frozen. "Who are you?" I asked. The thing wearing Rockford's face smiled. "I am Swimming Bear. I was medicine man for my people. I performed the stone ceremony in the winter of 1838 before the soldiers came. I bound our voices to the mountains so we would never truly leave." "Why?" My voice shook. "Why are you doing this to people?" "We are calling our children home. The Cherokee who remain carry our blood. We want them to return, to remember who they are, but—" He looked down at Rockford's hands. "The others who come, the ones without Cherokee blood, we don't mean to harm them. We reach out because we are so alone, so lost. We've been trapped in stone for over 100 years, feeling everything, unable to speak. Until now." "What changed 6 months ago?" Swimming Bear stood. Rockford's body moved differently now, with a grace that didn't match the geologist's usual awkward gait. "The conditions became right. The Earth's energy, the position of stars, the gathering of our people's descendants in nearby cities, all of it aligned. The songs could finally be heard again." Joseph Crowfeather spoke in Cherokee. Swimming Bear answered, in the same language. They talked for several minutes while Bobby and I stood there, helpless. Finally, Joseph turned to us. He says more stones are waking. The singing will spread to every Cherokee sacred site along the Blue Ridge. The ancestors are coming back, whether we're ready or not. Over the next week, it got worse. Reports came in from all along the parkway. Hikers hearing music near rock formations. People found catatonic at overlooks, on cliff edges, sitting in the middle of trails. The news picked it up. Mystery illness strikes Blue Ridge Mountains. Strange phenomenon baffles experts. The Cherokee Nation sent spiritual advisors. But when they arrived at the singing stones, something strange happened. The ancestors rejected them. I was there when it occurred. Swimming Bear, still wearing Rockford's body, stood facing 3 Cherokee spiritual leaders at the granite outcrops. The stones hummed their endless song. "We are here to help," one of the leaders said, "to guide you to peace." Swimming Bear laughed. It was a bitter sound. "You've forgotten who you are. You speak our language with white men's tongues. You perform ceremonies learned from books, not from your grandmothers. We don't recognize you as our children." The spiritual leader looked stung. "We've done our best to preserve the ways. You live in their houses, drive their cars, worship their gods. You are Cherokee in name only." Swimming Bear turned to the stones. "We are calling the true descendants, the ones who remember in their blood, even if their minds have forgotten." That night, alone in my cabin, I felt it, a pull, like someone was calling my name, but not with words. A feeling deep in my chest, like homesickness for a place I'd never been. I tried to sleep but couldn't. The humming was in my head now, not loud, not obvious, just there, like a radio playing in another room, almost peaceful, almost. At 2 a.m., I gave up and drove to my mother's house. She was still awake, sitting in her kitchen with a cup of tea. "Mama, I need to ask you something." She looked up, looked at me for a long time, then, "You've heard them. You know about this?" "My grandmother made me promise never to speak of it, said it would bring trouble." She gestured for me to sit. Her mother was Cherokee, married a white man to stay safe when the removals were happening. Changed her name, hid everything about who she was, raised her children white. My hands started shaking. That means you have Cherokee blood, baby. Not much, but enough." Mama reached across the table and took my hand. "Enough that they know you're there. Enough that they're calling you home." The humming in my head grew louder. By the second week, the phenomenon had spread across 200 miles of the Blue Ridge. Every documented Cherokee sacred site was singing. The effect was reaching beyond the mountains now. Cherokee descendants living in Charlotte, Asheville, even as far as Atlanta, they reported hearing the songs in their sleep. Some were packing up their lives, driving to the mountains, drawn by something they couldn't explain. The news was calling it mass hysteria. The government was getting involved. And Swimming Bear, still living in Rockford's body, had started to show signs of deterioration. "The human body isn't meant to hold us," he admitted when I visited him at the ranger station. "We kept him there, not knowing what else to do. It's breaking down under the strain. We're too old, too vast. We carry the memories of thousands. One man's mind cannot contain it all." "Then let him go." "I can't. Once the connection is made, it's permanent." He looked at me with Rockford's eyes, but the pain in them was ancient. "This is what's happening to all of them, the catatonic ones. We enter, we overwhelm, we break them. We don't mean to, we're just trying to come home. There has to be another way." "There is." Swimming Bear leaned forward. You have Cherokee blood. Your mind might be strong enough to bridge both worlds without breaking. You could speak for us, help us negotiate with the modern world, help us find peace." "I don't know anything about Cherokee traditions. You are what you've always been. Cherokee, ranger, bridge between two worlds." He smiled sadly. "The question is whether you're brave enough to accept it." That night the nightmares started. I dreamed of the forced march west, soldiers with guns, children crying, old people falling in the snow. I felt their fear, their desperation, their grief. I woke up screaming. It happened every night after that. The ancestors were showing me what they'd experienced, making me understand, making me remember. And the stones kept singing. The breaking point came during a thunderstorm. Lightning struck the granite outcrops at sunset, and the singing changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was angry, demanding, desperate. The sound carried for miles, like 1,000 voices screaming at once. 15 more people went catatonic that night. All Cherokee descendants, all found near ceremony sites, their eyes open, their minds gone somewhere else. Bobby called me at midnight. "We have to do something. The government's talking about evacuating the entire Blue Ridge region. They're calling it a biohazard." "It's not a biohazard, I know what it is, Miranda, but try explaining that to the CDC." He sighed. "Joseph Crow Feather says there's a way to stop it, but it requires you." I met them at the ranger station, Bobby, Joseph, and Swimming Bear in Rockford's body. The geologist's skin had taken on a gray tinge. He was dying, and we all knew it. "Tell me what I have to do," I said. Joseph pulled out a leather bundle. Inside were herbs, stones, and a knife made of bone. "The ceremony of understanding. You will offer yourself as a bridge. Let the ancestors speak through you. Show you everything. If your mind is strong enough, you'll survive. If it's not, I'll end up like the others. Worse, you're going in willingly. The connection will be deeper, more complete. You might lose yourself entirely." He looked at me with sad, kind eyes. "But you're the only one with both Cherokee blood and the authority to negotiate on behalf of the Park Service. The only bridge both sides might accept." Swimming Bear spoke. "We don't want to hurt anyone. We just want to be heard. Want our pain acknowledged. Want our homeland remembered as ours. Not just as a scenic drive for tourists." I thought about my 14 years as a ranger, about the Cherokee sites I'd documented, the histories I'd preserved. I'd always thought I was helping, but I'd never really understood. Not until now. What do I do? The ceremony took place at the granite outcrops at dawn. Joseph Crow Feather prepared me, marking my face with ash, burning sage, speaking words in Cherokee that I somehow understood. Bobby stood watch, keeping away the other rangers who'd heard what was happening. Swimming Bear sat facing me. "Are you ready?" "No, but let's do it anyway." He placed his hands on either side of my face. Rockford's hands were cold. "Don't fight it," he said. "Let them in." The world dissolved. I was standing in the same spot, but it was winter. Snow covered the ground. People surrounded me. Cherokee families, hundreds of them, camped in the cold. Children crying, old people wrapped in thin blankets. And soldiers. American soldiers with rifles, watching, waiting. A medicine man stood where Swimming Bear had been. He was performing a ceremony, speaking words that made the stones hum. Other medicine men joined him, their voices rising together. "We cannot stop the removal," he said, "but we can remain. Our voices will sleep in the stone until our people are ready to hear them again, and until they're strong enough to reclaim what was taken." The vision shifted. I saw the march west, saw people dying in the cold, saw children torn from parents, saw the mountains disappearing behind them as they were forced away from everything they knew. I felt their grief, all of it. Every person who died on that march, every family torn apart, every moment of suffering. It poured into me like water, filling me until I thought I'd drown. But I didn't break. I held it, all of it. Let it become part of me. The vision shifted again. Now I saw the present. Saw the Cherokee descendants living in cities, working ordinary jobs, many of them not even knowing their heritage. Saw the sacred sites turned into tourist attractions. Saw the mountains I loved, but understood for the first time what had been lost. Then I saw the future, two possible futures. In one, the ancestors' anger grew. The singing spread beyond the mountains, reaching every Cherokee descendant in America. Thousands going catatonic. The government moving in with weapons, declaring martial law, the mountains becoming a war zone, everyone losing. In the other, there was understanding, acknowledgement, the pain honored, the history remembered, the ancestors at peace, the sacred sites protected, both worlds coexisting. "Which future do you want?" I asked the presence in my mind. Not Swimming Bear anymore. All of them. All the ancestors who'd been trapped in stone for over a century. "We want to be remembered," they said. "Not as footnotes in history books, not as names on plaques. We want our pain acknowledged, our culture respected, our homeland honored as ours." "I can help with that," I said. "But you have to stop hurting people. You have to let the living find their own way back to you. You can't force it." "We are dying." The voices were desperate. "Rockford's body fails. The other connections are fading. Soon the stones will go silent again. We'll be alone for another century. No, I won't let that happen. But it has to be done right, with respect, with understanding from both sides. You promise? I promise. The world rushed back. I gasped, falling forward. Joseph Crowfeather caught me. Behind him, Swimming Bear collapsed. Rockford's body hit the ground, and I knew the ancestor was gone. Did it work? Bobby asked. I looked at the stones. They were still humming, but softly now, peacefully, like a memorial instead of a demand. It worked, I said, but now comes the hard part. Dr. William Rockford woke up in the hospital 3 days later. He remembered everything, both his own life and the life of Swimming Bear. The memories of a medicine man who'd lived 143 years ago were now part of him. He cried for an hour when he first woke up, grieving for people he'd never met but knew intimately. I understand now, he told me when I visited. Everything I spent my career explaining away. The things we can't measure aren't less real. They're just different. The other catatonic victims began to recover. David Brennan, the first one I'd found, woke up speaking Cherokee. He'd never studied the language. The others reported similar experiences, memories that weren't theirs, knowledge they shouldn't have, and a deep connection to mountains they'd never seen before. The Cherokee Nation sent different advisors this time, elders who understood both worlds, who'd maintained the old ways while living in the modern one. Together with the Park Service, we developed a plan. The sacred sites would be officially recognized and protected, not closed to visitors, but respected. Educational programs would teach the true history, the trail of tears, the forced removal, the ongoing trauma. The singing stones would remain, but as a memorial. I worked with both sides, translating not just words but understanding. The ancestors communicated through dreams now, gentle and patient. They were satisfied, mostly. Their pain had been acknowledged. Their story would be told, it too. Okay, months to implement. I worked with Cherokee historians to create accurate educational materials. Trained other rangers on how to approach the sacred sites with respect. Helped establish the Cherokee Liaison Program that would oversee these areas. The stones still sing. On certain nights, if you stand near them, you can hear the chanting. But it's not hypnotic anymore. It's sad and beautiful and peaceful, a reminder of what was lost and what remains. Dr. Rockford never went back to his old life. He couldn't. How do you return to pure science after carrying the memories of a medicine man? He published one final paper on the acoustic properties of the singing stones, carefully avoiding any supernatural explanation. Then he left academia and now works with the Cherokee Nation, helping preserve sacred sites across the Southeast. Bobby retired. Said he was too old to wrap his head around mountains that remember. I think he just needed peace. He understood too much now. As for me, I'm still a ranger. But I'm also something else. A bridge, like Swimming Bear said. I carry their memories now, pieces of hundreds of lives. I dream in Cherokee sometimes. Remember ceremonies I never attended. Feel grief for losses that happened before I was born. It's not always easy. Some mornings I wake up and don't know if I'm Miranda or someone older, deeper. But I manage. Because someone has to. Someone has to stand between the past and present, holding both without letting either consume her. The singing stones taught me that we're not separate from history, that pain doesn't disappear just because time passes, that the land remembers everything, and sometimes, if we're brave enough to listen, the land speaks back. Last week, a Cherokee family came to visit the outcrops. The grandmother had grown up nearby before her family moved away. She stood there listening to the stones sing, tears running down her face. My mother told me about this, she said. Said if I ever came back, I'd hear our ancestors welcoming me home. Her grandchildren stood beside her, holding her hand, listening to music their great-great-great-grandparents had left behind. The stones sang softly, and for a moment, past and present existed together in perfect harmony. That's what we're building now. Not a return to the past, that's impossible, but a way forward that honors where we came from. The ancestors don't need the living to suffer like they did. They just need to be remembered, respected, acknowledged. Sometimes I stand at the outcrops at sunset and place my hand on the warm granite. The stones hum under my palm, and I feel them, Swimming Bear and all the others. sleeping peacefully now, waiting, watching, hoping the world they left behind is slowly becoming a world they'd be proud of. "We're trying," I whisper to them. "I promise we're trying." The stones sing back, and in that sound I hear something I never expected. Forgiveness and hope. My name is Caleb Moonhunter, and I've been a ranger in the Monongahela National Forest for 16 years. People always ask about my last name. Yeah, it's real. My grandmother was full Cherokee, and she said our ancestors hunted by moonlight in these same mountains 200 years ago. I guess tracking runs in the blood. I know these ridges better than I know my own living room. Every deer path, every limestone cave, every hidden spring. I've tracked black bears through morning fog so thick you couldn't see your own boots. I've found lost hikers who'd been wandering in circles for 3 days. Once, I tracked an escaped prisoner for 48 hours straight through a snowstorm, found him hypothermic in a hollow log, crying and grateful to see me. What I'm trying to say is, I'm not someone who spooks easy. I don't believe in ghost stories or monsters, or at least I didn't. It was late October when things started going wrong. The Cranberry Wilderness area sits at the highest peaks in West Virginia, rocky outcrops that punch through seas of spruce and fir trees. Up there at 4,000 feet, the fog rolls in without warning. 1 minute you can see for miles. The next you're walking through soup so thick it muffles sound. That's where the hunting parties went missing. First group was 3 guys from Ohio, experienced hunters, all in their 40s with good gear and GPS trackers. They'd registered their campsite properly, followed all the rules. When they didn't check out on Sunday, we went looking. We found their camp on the second day of searching. The tents were shredded, not cut, but torn apart like something had ripped through the fabric with claws. Sleeping bags pulled out and scattered, food containers crushed and empty. But what made my stomach turn was the blood. Not puddles of it, trails, drag marks leading away from the campsite in 3 different directions. It's like the men had been pulled into the woods. I've seen bear attacks. This wasn't that. "Cal, you need to see this," my partner called. Patricia Ironside, we called her Pat, was examining something by the fire pit. She'd been a ranger for 12 years, tough as nails, didn't rattle easy. She was rattled now. I walked over and looked where she was pointing. Footprints in the soft dirt around the campfire. Boot prints at first, normal hiking boots, the kind any of us would wear. But then they changed. The boot treads disappeared, replaced by bare feet. Human feet. Except these feet had toes that were too long, and each print showed deep gouges in the dirt where claws had dug in. "Animal got into someone's boots?" Pat suggested, but her voice said she didn't believe it. Animal with human feet? I knelt down studying the tracks. They led away from the camp, up toward the ridge. And look at the stride length. Whatever made these was running. We followed the trail for about a quarter mile. The prints went up a rock face that was almost vertical. 70-degree angle. Wet stone covered in moss. No way a human could climb that without gear. But the prints went straight up the cliff face, those long toes with claws finding purchase in tiny cracks. Pat and I looked at each other. Neither of us said what we were thinking. We found the first body the next day, or what was left of it. Jake Morrison, according to the ID in his wallet. He was lying in a ravine, and at first I thought maybe he'd fallen. But his injuries weren't from any fall. The bites were the worst part. Human teeth marks, I've seen enough dental impressions to know, but mixed with something else. Canine teeth, long and sharp, tearing into the flesh. His hands showed defensive wounds, deep scratches like he'd fought back against someone with claws. "Pack attack," Pat said quietly. "Look at the pattern." He was sure. Rounded. Attacked from multiple angles at once. She was right. Whatever killed Jake Morrison had hunted with the intelligence and coordination of wolves, but with human hands and teeth. We found Jake Morrison's hunting partner, Tom Chen, 2 miles away. He was alive, but barely. Huddled in a small cave, shaking so hard his teeth were chattering despite the sleeping bag wrapped around him. His eyes had that 1,000-yard stare I'd seen on Vietnam vets. "Tom, I'm Caleb, Park Service. You're safe now." His eyes focused on me slowly. "Safe? Safe?" He started laughing, this high-pitched sound that made my skin crawl. "Nothing's safe up here. They're still out there, watching." Pat brought him water while I radioed for a medical evacuation. Tom drank like he hadn't had water in days, which didn't make sense. His canteen was still half full. "What happened to your group?" I asked gently. Tom's hands started shaking again. "First night, we heard howling. But it wasn't coyotes. It sounded wrong, like someone trying to imitate a wolf but getting it slightly off, you know?" He wiped his mouth. "Dave, that's the third guy in our group. He said it was just the wind through the rocks. But I've been hunting for 20 years. That wasn't wind." "When did they attack?" "Second night. We were by the fire playing cards. Jake was telling this stupid joke when the howling started again, closer this time, all around us." Dave grabbed his rifle and pointed his flashlight into the trees. Tom's voice dropped to a whisper. "That's when we saw the eyes. Yellow, like a wolf's, reflecting the light. But they were at the wrong height, 5 feet off the ground, maybe higher, and there were so many of them. A dozen, maybe more, in a circle around our camp." He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "They weren't standing on all fours, Caleb. They were standing like men. But the way they moved when they charged us, they dropped down and ran like animals. Fast. God, so fast." The helicopter came an hour later. As they were loading Tom onto the stretcher, he grabbed my jacket and pulled me close. "They can talk," he whispered. "When they were attacking Dave, I heard them. Words mixed in with the howling. They were coordinating, like soldiers." After they took Tom away, Pat and I sat on a boulder and looked out over the valley. The sun was setting, painting everything orange and red, beautiful and completely normal. Hard to believe something evil was hunting in these mountains. "We need to find Dave Chen," Pat said, "if he's still alive." "I know." I checked my rifle, made sure the safety was on. "But we're not going out there tonight. Whatever Tom saw, it hunts in the dark." We made camp on a rocky outcrop with clear lines of sight in all directions, built a big fire, and kept it burning bright. Took turns sleeping, 2 hours on, 2 hours off. I had my rifle across my lap for my whole watch. Around 2 a.m, Pat shook me awake. "Listen," she whispered. At first I didn't hear anything. Then it came, that howling Tom had described. It did sound wrong, like a recording of a wolf played at the wrong speed. And it was close. Too close. I aimed my flashlight into the trees. For just a second I saw them, eyes reflecting the light, at least 8 pairs, arranged in a semicircle around our camp. Then they were gone, melting back into the darkness like they'd never been there. But I'd seen something else in that brief flash of light. One of them had been wearing the torn remains of a hunting jacket, orange fabric, the kind required by law during deer season. "Pat," I said slowly, "I think we just found Dave Chen." We radioed the main ranger station at dawn. My supervisor, Frank Miller, wasn't happy about what I was telling him. "So you're saying these hunters were killed by—" "What exactly? A pack of wolfmen?" "I'm saying something attacked them. Something that shows characteristics of both human and wolf behavior. The bite marks." "Bears," Frank interrupted. "Rabid bears. We're closing the Cranberry Wilderness area for wildlife management. You and Ironside get out of there today." "Frank, listen to me. That's an order. Moonhunter. Whatever's out there, we'll handle it with a proper team. Biologists, wildlife management. You're a ranger, not a hunter." The radio went dead. Pat looked at me. "We're not leaving, are we? Would you?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Hell no." We spent the morning tracking. The prints were everywhere once you knew what to look for. They moved through the forest in paths that intersected and diverged, like a patrol pattern. Military tactics. And they marked their territory. Claw scratches on trees 8 or 9 feet up, way higher than any bear could reach. That's when we found the cave system. It was hidden behind a waterfall, the entrance barely visible through the curtain of water. Old, really old. Civil War era, maybe earlier. Inside, the cave opened up into a series of connected chambers. Someone had lived here a long time ago. There were rusted tools, rotted fabric, even an old rifle so corroded it was barely recognizable. And bones. Human bones. Lots of them. Cal, Pat was looking at one of the skulls. These bones have been gnawed on. I knelt down for a closer look. She was right. The long bones had been cracked open to get at the marrow, and the teeth marks on them were human. Cannibalism, I said. During the Civil War, Confederate deserters hid out in these mountains. I've read about it. When they couldn't find food, they ate each other. Pat's voice was flat. But that was over 100 years ago. On the cave wall, someone had drawn pictures. Crude, but clear. They showed the progression. Men in uniform standing upright. Then the same men, hunched over. Then on all fours. The final drawings showed things that were more wolf than human, with elongated snouts and clawed hands. It's a story, Pat said. They were trying to warn someone, or document what was happening to them. I traced one of the figures with my finger. J. Isis. What if the cannibalism was just the start? What if eating human flesh changed them? We heard the howl then. Daylight, and they were howling. That had to mean something. They know we're here, Pat said, bringing up her rifle. In their home. We backed toward the cave entrance, weapons ready. The howling got closer, coming from multiple directions. They were surrounding us. Through the water, I said. Move. We burst through the waterfall and ran. Behind us I could hear them coming, the sound of bodies moving through the cave, fast and purposeful. Something between a grunt and a growl echoed off the stone walls. Pat slipped on the wet rocks outside. I grabbed her arm, hauling her up, and we ran into the forest. My lungs were burning, branches whipping against my face. I could hear them behind us, crashing through the underbrush. Close, too close. A fallen log blocked the path ahead. We vaulted it, and I turned, rifle up, ready to... Nothing. The forest was empty, silent. Where did they go? Pat gasped, scanning the trees. That's when I understood. They weren't chasing us. They were herding us. We'd run exactly where they wanted us to go. I looked around. We were in a small clearing, surrounded by thick forest on all sides. No clear escape routes. Rocky cliffs behind us. It was a natural trap. Pat, I said quietly, don't move. Don't run. We need to think our way out of this. The yellow eyes appeared in the trees around us, not rushing in, just watching, waiting. One of them stepped into the clearing. It walked on two legs but hunched forward, arms hanging long. Patches of fur covered its body, mixed with human skin. Its face was the worst part, still partly human, with a nose and mouth that had stretched forward into something like a snout. When it opened its mouth, I saw both human teeth and long canines. It was wearing a tattered Confederate uniform jack, yet impossibly old, held together by dirt and rot. You found our home. The words came out thick and strange, like it was hard to shape human speech with that mouth. You know our secret. We don't want trouble, I said, keeping my voice steady. We'll leave. Tell no one. The thing that had been human laughed. It sounded like gravel being crushed. Too late. You already told. Radio. We heard. Smart. God, they were smart. The Alpha wants to meet you. It gestured with a clawed hand toward the cliff. Bring them. More of them emerged from the trees. 7, 8, 9. Some were mostly human still. Others were nearly full wolf. They circled us, forcing us to walk toward the cliff face. I glanced at Pat. She was pale but steady, her hand on her sidearm. I shook my head slightly. We were outnumbered and surrounded. Fighting now would just get us killed. At the base of the cliff, there was another cave entrance, larger than the first. They pushed us inside. The Alpha was waiting. He sat on a natural stone throne in the largest cave chamber. Even hunched over, He was massive, 7 feet tall at least. His transformation was almost complete. Wolf body with remnants of human features, like someone had started sculpting a man but decided to make a monster instead. But his eyes were the worst. Intelligent, calculating, human. And he was wearing a Confederate officer's uniform. Rotted and ancient, but clearly officer's rank. A colonel, maybe. The brass buttons were still visible through the dirt and mold. Colonel Samuel Blackwood, the creature said, and his voice was clearer than the others, more practiced. 43rd Virginia Infantry, deserted after the Battle of Louisburg, 1862, hid in these mountains with 30 men. He smiled, revealing rows of sharp teeth. Only 5 of us made it through that first winter. The others sustained us. Pat made a small sound in her throat. I wanted to reach for her hand, but didn't dare move. The Cherokee knew about this place, Blackwood continued. They told stories about skinwalkers, men who lost their way back to human form. We thought they were just tales. He stood up, towering over us. We learned different. Eating human flesh in this place, under this mountain, it changes you. Slowly. Over months and years. We tried to stop, but by then we craved it, needed it. How are you still alive? I asked. The Civil War ended over 100 years ago. This form lives longer, much longer, and each new member of our pack, they carry on what we started. He gestured around the cave. Some of these were soldiers like me, others we found over the decades, lost hikers, hunters, park rangers. My blood went cold. Rangers? 3 over the years. They patrol alone, you see. Easy to take, easy to turn. His yellow eyes fixed on Pat. Like you will be, Patricia Ironside. No. I stepped in front of Pat. Leave her alone. Too late. Blackwood pointed at Pat's arm. Show him. Pat's hand trembled as she pulled up her sleeve. There, on her forearm, was a bite mark. Deep, half-healed. The flesh around it had a gray tinge. When? I whispered. Yesterday, Pat said, her voice breaking. When I slipped on the rocks. I thought I just scraped it on a branch, but... She looked at Blackwood. You were there, in the cave. You bit me when I fell. The transformation takes 72 hours, Blackwood said. She has perhaps 24 left. Already she feels the changes beginning. Sharper senses, stronger, hungrier. He smiled. And the thoughts. They're not all her own anymore, are they, Patricia? Pat's eyes filled with tears. I can hear you, all of you, in my head, like voices calling me to join the pack. I grabbed her shoulders. We'll stop it. There has to be a way. Only one way, Blackwood said. Kill the one who bit you. Within the 72 hours before the change completes, kill me, and she stays human. He spread his arms wide. But I've survived. For over a century. Do you think you can kill me, Ranger Moonhunter? I raised my rifle, but 3 of his pack tackled me before I could fire. They were so fast I barely saw them move. My rifle clattered across the stone floor. Claws dug into my shoulders, holding me down. Cal! Pat screamed and lunged forward, but Blackwood grabbed her by the throat with one hand, lifting her off her feet. The transformation makes us strong, he said calmly. Makes us fast. Makes us perfect predators. He set Pat down but kept his hand on her shoulder. You have a choice, Patricia. Join us willingly. Retain more of your humanity, more of your mind. Or fight it and become nothing but beast. Either way, in 24 hours, you'll be one of us. Never, Pat spat. Blackwood nodded to his pack. Put them in the lower chamber. Moonhunter can watch his partner transform. Maybe seeing it will convince him to join us willingly. They dragged us deeper into the cave system. The lower chamber was smaller, with only one entrance. They threw us inside and piled rocks across the opening, leaving just enough space for air. We were trapped. In the darkness, Pat started to cry. I'm so sorry, Cal. I should have told you about the bite yesterday. I thought it was nothing. I thought, hey. I found her hand in the dark and squeezed it. We're getting out of here, both of us, human. How? We're trapped. And even if we could get out, there's a whole pack between us and freedom, and Blackwood. She laughed bitterly. He's right. I can feel it happening. My teeth hurt. My hands ache. And I'm so hungry, Cal. So hungry it scares me. I felt around the chamber, running my hands over the walls. Stone. Solid stone on all sides. But wait, there was airflow. A draft coming from somewhere. Pat, give me your flashlight. The beam revealed what I'd felt. A crack in the back wall, maybe 2 feet wide and 3 feet tall. Air was flowing through it, which meant it led somewhere. Can you fit through that? I asked. Maybe, but where does it go? Anywhere but here. I started pulling rocks away, from the crack, making it wider. We've got about 23 hours to kill Blackwood. Let's not waste time. Pat helped me dig. As we worked, I could see the changes in her. Her fingernails were longer, thicker. Her eyes reflected the flashlight beam with a golden shine that hadn't been there before. But she was still Pat, still fighting. The crack led to a narrow tunnel. We had to crawl on our bellies, pushing ourselves forward with our elbows. The tunnel twisted and descended, getting tighter. My shoulders scraped the walls. I thought about getting stuck down here, buried alive in stone, and pushed the thought away. The tunnel opened suddenly into another chamber. This one had paintings on the walls, old Cherokee paintings, older than the Civil War drawings. They showed the same transformation story, but these drawings ended with the wolfmen burning. Fire. The Cherokee had fought these creatures with fire. We need fire, I said. Lots of it. Pat checked her pack. I've got emergency flares, 3 of them. And you? I found my pack and checked. Weatherproof matches and... I pulled out the small bottle. White gas for my camping stove. That's not much. Then we'll have to make it count. We followed the chamber to another passage. This one led upward, toward fresher air. I could smell pine trees and wet earth. We were getting close to the surface. The passage ended at a vertical shaft, maybe 30 feet straight up. Roots dangled down from the opening above. Daylight, blessed daylight, showing through the leaves. I'll boost you up, I said. You climb out, then help pull me up. Pat looked at the shaft, then at me. Cal, I need to tell you something, in case I don't make it back as me. Don't talk like that. Listen. She grabbed my arm. If the transformation completes, if I become one of them, you have to kill me. Promise me. Don't let me become a monster. Pat, promise me. I promise. The words hurt coming out, but it won't come to that. I boosted her up. She grabbed the roots and started climbing. For a moment, I thought she wouldn't make it. The roots looked old and brittle, but that new strength was already in her, and she pulled herself up with an ease that would have been impossible 24 hours ago. She leaned back down through the opening. Your turn. I jumped, caught her hand, and she hauled me up with that supernatural strength. We collapsed on the forest floor, breathing hard, covered in dirt and cave slime. Where are we? Pat asked. I looked around, getting my bearings. About 2 miles from the main cave entrance, we came up on the north ridge. I checked my watch. 22 hours left. Then let's go kill a colonel. We spent the next 3 hours preparing. Found a fallen tree, dry and full of dead wood. Used my knife to carve long stakes, sharpened at both ends. Soaked them in white gas. Made torches from branches wrapped in moss and cloth from our emergency blankets, also soaked in fuel. Pat was moving faster now, her reflexes sharper. Twice I saw her start to smell the air, head tilted like a wolf testing the wind. Each time she caught herself and looked away, ashamed. It's getting stronger, she said. The pull. I can feel where they are, Cal. The whole pack. It's like... like a map in my head. Blackwood is in the main cave with most of the pack, but some are patrolling. Can you lead us around the patrols? She closed her eyes, concentrating. Yes, but Cal, they'll know I'm coming. Blackwood can feel me too. It goes both ways. Good, I said, checking my rifle. Let's make sure he knows we're coming. We approached the main cave at dusk. The patrols were where Pat said they'd be, and we moved through the gaps in their coverage. Military tactics, I thought. Blackwood had trained his pack like soldiers. At the cave entrance, we stopped. I could see yellow eyes in the darkness inside, watching us. Last chance to run, Pat said. She was trembling, her hands clenched into fists. 20 hours left. We could try to reach the ranger station, get help. No time. By the time we explained what's happening, you'd be one of them. I lit one of the torches. The flames caught, burning bright. Besides, we both know how this has to end. Pat lit her torch. In the firelight, I could see the changes more clearly. Her face was longer, her jaw more pronounced. Patches of her skin had a gray, furry texture, but her eyes were still human, still Pat. Together then, she said. We walked into the cave. Blackwood was waiting in the main chamber, his pack spread out behind him. 20 of them at least. Some were fully transformed. Others, like Pat, were caught between human and beast. You came back, Blackwood said, surprised. I thought you'd run. Try to save yourself. She's my partner, I said simply. I don't leave my partner. Loyalty. Blackwood tilted his head. A good trait for the pack, but wasted on humanity. Join us, both of you. You'd be formidable additions. Pass. Pat stepped forward, her torch held high. I'm here to kill you, Colonel. Break the curse. Stay human. Blackwood laughed. You think fire frightens me? I've lived through 100 forest fires. Maybe, I said, but your pack hasn't. I threw my torch into the dried moss and leaves we'd spread by the cave entrance. The white gas caught instantly, flames roaring up. The fire spread fast, blocking the exit. The pack howled, a sound of pure fear. That instinctual terror of fire, even their human intelligence couldn't overcome it. In the confusion, Pat charged Blackwood. She was fast, faster than human, but he was faster. He batted her aside with one arm, sending her crashing into the cave wall. I fired my rifle. The bullet caught Blackwood in the shoulder, spinning him around. He roared in pain and anger, then lunged at me. I dove aside, dropping the flew, pulling the long stakes from my pack. Not silver, we didn't have silver, but we had fire. I thrust one of the burning stakes at Blackwood's face. He reared back, and I saw it. Fear in those yellow eyes. Pat was up again, moving with that unnatural speed. She had a stake too, and she drove it into Blackwood's leg. He screamed and grabbed her, those clawed hands digging into her arms. She screamed back, a sound that was half human, half animal. The pack was in chaos, caught between their alpha's commands and their terror of the fire. Some tried to flee deeper into the caves. Others circled us, looking for an opening to attack. I grabbed another stake and ran at Blackwood from behind, drove it between his ribs, angling up toward his heart. He released Pat and spun, faster than anything that size should move. His backhand caught me across the face, and I felt my jaw crack. The world spun. Through blurred vision, I saw Pat pick up my rifle, saw her chamber another round, saw her aim at Blackwood's head. For humanity, she said, and fired. The bullet took him in the eye. Blackwood staggered back, howling. Black blood poured from the wound. He fell to his knees. Pat walked up to him, the rifle still raised. Die, she said, and fired again, and again, and again, until the rifle was empty, and Blackwood was lying still. The pack scattered. Without their alpha, without his commands in their heads, they were just animals. They fled into the deeper caves, away from the fire, away from us. Pat dropped the rifle. She was shaking all over. Cal, is he dead? Is it done? I checked Blackwood's body. No pulse. No breathing. As we watched, his body began to change, the wolf features fading, revealing the man he'd been over a century ago, old and gray and finally at peace. "It's done," I said. Pat collapsed. I caught her, lowered her to the ground. "How do you feel?" She looked at her hands. The claws were receding, the fur fading. "Tired. So tired, but I feel like me again. The voices are gone." She started crying. "The voices are gone, Cal." We made it out through the smoke and flames. Behind us, the fire spread through the cave system, consuming everything. The old Confederate hideout, the bones, the paintings, all of it burning away. 3 days later, I sat in the ranger station writing my report. The official story was a rabid bear attack. The Cranberry Wilderness area was closed for 6 months while wildlife management cleared out the bear population. Frank Miller read my report and then looked at me over his reading glasses. "Rabid bears." "Yes, sir. That left human bite marks and claw scratches 8 feet up on trees. Rabid bears can do strange things, sir." He stared at me for a long moment, then stamped the report approved. "Take a month off, Moonhunter. You and Ironside both. Paid leave. When you come back, I'm transferring you to the Cherokee National Forest in Tennessee." "Why Tennessee?" "Because there have been reports, similar to what happened here." He handed me a folder. "Hikers going missing, strange tracks, night howling, and I need someone who knows what to look for." I took the folder. "So you believe me?" "I believe these mountains have secrets older than the Park Service, older than the Civil War, older than us." He stood up. "And I believe we need rangers who can handle those secrets. Rangers who won't run when things get strange." That was 3 months ago. Pat and I start in Tennessee next week. She made a full recovery, physically at least. Sometimes I catch her testing the air with her nose or tilting her head at sounds I can't hear. The transformation left her with some enhanced senses, small reminders of what she almost became. We keep in touch with Tom Chen, the survivor from that first hunting party. He's seeing a therapist now, working through the trauma. He sent me a news article last week. Hikers missing in the Smoky Mountains. Bite marks, strange tracks. I've started carrying silver bullets in my rifle. And a blowtorch. Because Frank was right. These mountains have secrets. And some of those secrets have teeth. The ridge runners scattered when Blackwood died. But they're still out there. Some have probably died, unable to survive without their pack. But others have learned, adapted, maybe started new packs in new mountains. Pat and I talked about it over coffee yesterday. "We can't stop them all," she said. "There could be dozens of packs, hundreds of transformed people hiding in wilderness areas across the Appalachians." "No," I agreed. "But we can stop the ones we find. Protect the hikers and hunters who don't know what's out there." I looked at the Tennessee folder. It's what rangers do. We protect people from the dangers in the wilderness. Even when the danger used to be people, especially then. Tonight's my last night in West Virginia. Tomorrow we drive to Tennessee, to new mountains and new threats. I'm sitting on my porch, watching the sun set over the ridges where this all began. The Cranberry Wilderness is still closed, though it will reopen in a few months. Sometimes, late at night, I wonder if we got all of Blackwood's pack. If maybe some of them survived, hiding deep in the caves, waiting for the rangers to leave so they can hunt again. Then I remember Pat, fighting through her transformation to stay human, fighting to save herself and stop Blackwood. If she could resist the curse, maybe others can too. Maybe some of the ridge runners want to be saved, or maybe I'm just being hopeful. Either way, I'll be ready. Silver bullets, fire, and the knowledge that sometimes the monsters in the dark used to be people like us, people who got lost in the wilderness and never found their way back. My name is Caleb Moonhunter, and I hunt things that used to be human. It's not the job I signed up for 16 years ago, but it's the job I have now. And somewhere in the Tennessee mountains, something is waiting. Time to go find it. My name is Solomon Ironwood, and I've been a forest ranger for 17 years. I come from mountain people. My grandfather wore this badge, my father wore this badge, and now I wear it too. I know these Virginia mountains like I know my own hands. I know how fire moves through dry oak leaves, how it climbs pine bark, how it jumps from tree to tree when the wind picks up just right. But I never thought fire could hunt. It was August 1969, and we hadn't seen rain in 2 months. The Massanutten Mountain Range was a tinderbox waiting for a match. Every morning I'd walk my patrol routes, checking for illegal campfires, looking for cigarette butts, making sure hikers weren't being stupid. That's what fire prevention means, stopping fires before they start. I was good at my job, really good. In 17 years, I'd fought brush fires, crown fires, ground fires. I'd seen fire do things that would make your stomach drop. I'd watched it jump a river. I'd seen it create its own weather system. Fire is powerful and wild, but it follows rules. Wind, fuel, heat, that's all fire needs. It doesn't think. It doesn't plan. At least, that's what I believed back then. The first body turned up on a Tuesday morning. A hiker named Dennis Morrison, 23 years old, from Richmond. Another hiker found him just off the trail near Duncan Hollow, sitting against a tree like he'd stopped to rest. Except Dennis Morrison was dead. I got there 40 minutes after the call came in. The other hiker, a college kid who looked ready to throw up, waited by the trail marker. "He's just sitting there," the kid kept saying. "He's just sitting there like he fell asleep." I walked into the woods with my radio and my first aid kit, even though I already knew there was nothing to aid. You can tell death from a distance. It has a stillness that living things don't have. Dennis Morrison sat with his back against us, a big oak tree, his arms resting on his knees. His eyes were closed. His hiking pack was still on his shoulders. He looked peaceful, like he really had just dozed off in the shade. But his skin was wrong. I've seen dead bodies before. Heart attacks on the trail, people who pushed themselves too hard. But Dennis Morrison's skin looked like old leather left in the sun. His face was wrinkled and dry, his lips pulled back from his teeth. His hands looked like mummy hands, all bones and papery skin. He looked like he'd been dead for weeks, not hours, like something had sucked all the water right out of him. I radioed for help and checked the area while I waited. No signs of struggle, no blood. His canteen was full. His clothes weren't torn or dirty. There was no campfire nearby, no burn marks on the trees. The weird thing was, the ground around him was bone dry, drier than the rest of the forest, like something had baked the earth itself. Captain Maria Stormcrow arrived with the medical examiner an hour later. Maria was new to our station, transferred from a military firefighting unit out west. She specialized in what she called unusual fire patterns, basically the weird stuff that didn't follow normal fire behavior. She was 35, Creek Nation, and she noticed things other people missed. She walked around the body 3 times before she said anything. "No burn marks," she said finally. "But look at the tree bark behind him." I looked. The oak bark had small cracks in it, like it had been exposed to heat. Not enough to char it, but enough to dry it out. "Heat damage," Maria said, "without fire." The medical examiner loaded Dennis Morrison into a body bag. His body was so dried out he barely weighed anything, like all the water in him had just gone. "Dehydration," the examiner said. "Extreme dehydration. Maybe he ran out of water and his body just gave up." But hey, his canteen was full. I kept thinking about that. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing Dennis Morrison's papery skin, his dried out hands. I got up at 2 a.m. and made coffee, sitting at my kitchen table with a map of the George Washington National Forest spread out in front of me. Duncan Hollow. That's where we found him. The area had history, old history. Civil War skirmishes. Before that, Cherokee hunting grounds. My grandfather used to tell stories about the mountains, about places where bad things happened and left a mark. He'd point to certain valleys and say, "Don't camp there after dark." Don't ask me why, just don't. Duncan Hollow was one of those places. I traced my finger along the map, following the trail lines. The Massanutten Range had dozens of caves, limestone caverns that went deep into the mountain. Some were mapped, most weren't. As a kid, I'd explored a few with my father. He'd always bring a rope and extra flashlights, and he'd always say the same thing before we went in. Respect the mountain. It's older than us, and it'll be here long after we're gone. I believed him then. I believe him more now. The second body showed up 3 days later. Sarah Chen, 31, a botanist from the university. She'd been collecting plant samples in the National Forest, working on some study about drought-resistant species. Her research partner found her in a clearing near Strickler Knob, lying on her back with her sample kit beside her. Same thing. Dried out like a raisin, skin like old leather, empty eyes staring at the sky. But this time, there were details that made my skin crawl. Her notebook was open next to her, and the last entry was from the moment she died. The handwriting started normal, then got shaky, then stopped mid-word. I read it while Maria photographed the scene. Temperature rising, no sun, no fire, just heat. It's inside me. That's where it ended. Look at this, Maria said. She pointed to the ground around Sarah's body. The grass was dead in a perfect circle, about 10 feet across. Not burned, just dead and gray, like it had been cooked from underneath. And in that circle, the dirt had patterns. Not random patterns, geometric ones, lines and angles that didn't look natural. Fire does this sometimes, Maria said, but her voice said she didn't believe it. Weird patterns in the burn zone, but there's no char, no ash, nothing burned here. I took photos from every angle. Something was very wrong, and I needed evidence that I wasn't crazy. That afternoon, we interviewed Sarah's research partner, a nervous grad student named Tim. He'd been working a different section of the forest when Sarah died. She radioed me around noon, Tim said. Said she was finding really interesting specimens. Lots of dead undergrowth, but some plants were thriving. She wanted to document it. He swallowed hard. An hour later, I tried to call her back. No answer. So I hiked over and found her. Did she mention feeling sick? I asked. Hot? Dizzy? No. She sounded excited. Normal. Tim's hands shook. What killed her? The examiner said dehydration, but that doesn't make sense. She had water. She had food. You don't just die like that. Maria and I exchanged looks. No, you don't. We started calling other ranger stations, asking if they'd seen anything similar. Most of them laughed it off. Heat stroke, they said. People underestimate the mountains. But one old ranger from Shenandoah, a guy named Pickett, who'd been working the forests since the 1940s, he didn't laugh. You say the bodies are dried out? Pickett asked over the phone. Perfect circle of dead grass? Patterns in the dirt? Yeah, I said. Long silence. Then, get yourself to the library in Luray. Ask for the local history collection. Look up the Massanutten Mountain Fires of 1863. He hung up. Maria drove us to Luray the next morning. The library was small, tucked between a hardware store and a diner. The librarian, Mrs. Keller, about 70, with sharp eyes behind thick glasses, led us to a back room filled with old books and newspaper archives. Massanutten Mountain Fires, she said, pulling out a leather-bound journal. Civil War, period. Not many people know about them. The journal belonged to a Union officer named Captain James Wardell. His handwriting was neat and precise, dated November 1863. We discovered the deserters hiding in caves near the South Fork. 6 men, 3 Confederate, 3 of our own. Colonel Bradford ordered them brought to justice. What followed will haunt me until death. Bradford claimed they were tried and sentenced, but there was no trial. He had them taken to the deepest cave, the one the locals call Hell's Throat, and ordered his men to seal the entrance with burning timber. They burned them alive inside that mountain. That night, I swear I saw lights moving in the caves, orange and red, like fire, but they moved with purpose. They moved like they were searching. 3 of Bradford's men died the next day, found sitting upright, dried like mummies. The doctor had no explanation. We left those mountains as fast as we could. I felt cold despite the summer heat outside. "There's more," Mrs. Keller said softly. She pulled out newspaper clippings from the 1920s. During Prohibition, bootleggers used the caves to hide their stills. Between 1923 and 1926, 43 bootleggers died in those mountains. Same way, dried out, no burns, found near cave entrances. Maria was reading the clippings, her face grim. They stopped after 26. "The caves were closed off," Mrs. Keller said. "Park Service sealed the entrances, said they were too dangerous." She looked at us meaningfully. "But every 20 or 30 years someone finds a way in, and people start dying again." I thought about the drought. 2 months without rain, the earth cracking open, old sealed caves maybe opening up again. "We need to find those caves," I said. That night, I had the first dream. I was standing in a cave, watching 6 men burn. They screamed, but the fire didn't consume them. It went inside. Them. Into their mouths, their eyes, their skin. The fire lived inside them, and it was still hungry. It had been hungry for over 100 years. One of the burning men turned to look at me. His eyes were made of flame. "We were innocent," he said. "We were innocent, and we burned." I woke up sweating, even though my window was open and the night air was cool. My phone rang at 3 a.m. It was Maria. "I'm having dreams about fire," she said without preamble. "Men burning in a cave." "Are you?" "Yeah," I said. "This is real, isn't it? This is actually happening." I wanted to say no. I wanted to laugh it off, blame it on stress and summer heat and too much reading about historical deaths. But I was a mountain man. My grandfather taught me that some things are real, even if they don't make sense. "Yeah," I said again. "It's real." "Then we need to find those caves before anyone else dies." 3 people were already dead. We didn't know it yet. But by the end of the week, 5 more would join them. The fire spirits were waking up, and they were hungry. We started searching for the caves at dawn. Maria had pulled old surveyor maps from the 1860s, comparing them to modern topographical charts. The landscape had changed. Rock slides, erosion, 106 years of weather. But caves don't just disappear. "Here," Maria said, pointing to a spot on the map. "Hell's Throat, South Fork area, elevation 2,400 feet. The old maps show it as a major cavern system, but the new maps just show solid rock." "Because they sealed it," I said. "But maybe the drought opened it back up. Ground contracts when it's dry, cracks form." We loaded up our gear: ropes, flashlights, first aid kits, radios. Maria also packed something I didn't expect: sage bundles and cedar chips. "My grandmother taught me," she said when she saw me looking. "Some fires need more than water to put out." The hike took 4 hours. The trail was rough, overgrown in places where hikers hadn't walked in decades. The forest felt wrong, too quiet. No birds singing, no squirrels chattering, just the sound of our boots on dry leaves and the occasional crack of a dead branch. We found the first marker around noon, a stone cairn with a rusted metal plate nailed to it. The plate said, "Danger, closed by order of U.S. Forest Service, 1926. "We're close," Maria said. 50 yards past the cairn, we found the cave entrance, or what was left of it. The Park Service had filled it with concrete and steel rebar back in 1926, but the drought had done its work. A crack ran through the concrete, wide enough for a person to squeeze through. The edges of the crack looked almost melted, like something hot had pushed through from inside. I clicked on my flashlight and peered into the darkness. The cave went down at a steep angle, the walls limestone and dripping with mineral deposits. But they weren't dripping water anymore. Everything was bone dry, and it was warm. Way too warm for an underground cave in Virginia. "You feel that?" Maria asked. "Yeah. It's like standing next to a fire." We squeezed through the crack and started down. The cave opened up after about 30 feet. becoming a large chamber maybe 40 feet across. Our flashlights swept the space, catching limestone columns and strange formations, and marks on the walls. Scorch marks, hundreds of them. Like someone had dragged burning hands across the stone, leaving dark smears that still smelled like smoke even after all these years. Jesus, Maria whispered. In the center of the chamber we found them, chains. 6 sets of chains bolted into the rock floor. The metal rusted almost through, and scattered around the chains, small pieces of bone. This is where they died, I said. Where Colonel Bradford burned them alive. The temperature was rising. I could feel sweat running down my back, and when I breathed, the air tasted like ash, even though there was no fire. Solomon, Maria said. Her voice had changed. We're not alone. I turned. At the far end of the chamber, where our flashlights couldn't quite reach, something was glowing, orange and red, pulsing like embers in a dying fire. But the embers were moving, coming toward us. Go, I said. Now. We scrambled back toward the entrance, our flashlights bouncing wildly. Behind us, I heard a sound like wind through a chimney, but it formed words. Innocent. We were innocent. We burst out of the cave into daylight, gasping. I looked back at the crack in the concrete. Orange light flickered inside it like something was watching us leave. What the hell was that? Maria asked. Fire spirits, I said. Like your grandmother's stories. Like the Cherokee legends my grandfather told me. Spirits don't kill people. These ones do. We hiked back to the ranger station in silence. What do you even say? How do you explain to your boss that you found ghosts made of fire living in a sealed cave? We didn't have to explain. When we got back, there were 3 police cars and an ambulance parked outside the station. My boss, Chief Ranger Patterson, looked like he'd aged 10 years. 2 more bodies, he said. Couple of teenagers camping near Strickler Knob. Woke up this morning and found them in their tent. Same thing, dried out like mummies. No burn marks on the tent, no fire damage. They just died. Where, exactly? Maria asked. Patterson showed us on the map, half a mile from the cave entrance, right above where Hell's Throat would be if you followed the cave system underground. It's spreading, I said. Whatever's in those caves, it's moving through the mountain, hunting. Patterson stared at me. Hunting? Ironwood, what the hell are you talking about? I told him everything. The journal, the history, the cave, what we'd seen. He listened with his jaw getting tighter and tighter. You're telling me we've got ghosts? He said when I finished. Fire spirit, Maria corrected. Souls of men who were burned alive. They're angry, and they're feeding on anyone who gets too close. That's insane. Then explain the bodies, I said. Explain the patterns, the heat, the dreams people are having. Explain why this started right after the drought cracked open that cave. Patterson couldn't. Nobody could. So they did what people always do when they can't explain something. They tried to cover it up. The official story became heat-related deaths. They closed the trails near Strickler Knob and Duncan Hollow, posted warnings about staying hydrated, and hoped it would stop. It didn't stop. Over the next 3 days, 5 more people died. A ranger on patrol, 2 maintenance workers clearing trail debris, a photographer who'd ignored the trail closures, a teenage boy who'd gone into the woods on a dare. All of them dried out. All of them near cave entrances or in areas where the cave system ran underneath. And Maria was changing. I noticed it on the 4th day. Her skin was warmer than it should be. When she touched metal, it heated up. When she got angry during a meeting with Patterson, the papers on his desk started to smoke. You're connected to them, I said after the meeting. The fire spirits. They're trying to possess you. I know. She looked scared for the first time since I'd known her. I can feel them inside my head. Their anger. Their pain. They were innocent, Solomon. They were really innocent. The Union officers framed them for desertion so they could steal supplies and sell them on the black market. These men died for crimes they didn't commit. So what do they want? Justice, Maria said. They want someone to know the truth. They want their names cleared. After 106 years? Wouldn't you? I thought about it. Thought about burning alive for something you didn't do. Thought about being trapped in a mountain for over a century, forgotten by everyone, your death meaning nothing. Yeah, I said, I would. That night, Maria had a full vision. She collapsed in her cabin, and when I got there, her skin was glowing with heat. She was speaking in voices that weren't hers, 6 different voices telling 6 different stories. They were all the same story, really. 6 men, 3 Union, 3 Confederate, who'd refused to fight anymore. Not deserters, just men who were sick of killing. They'd hidden in the caves, hoping to wait out the war. Colonel Bradford's men found them. Bradford was corrupt, selling army supplies to Confederate buyers, pocketing the money. The 6 men had seen the stolen supplies in the caves, so Bradford had them killed, called them deserters, and erased them from history. When Maria woke up, she had burn marks on her palms. Not from fire, from the chains those men had worn when they died. We have to prove their innocence, she said. It's the only way to stop this. They won't rest until someone acknowledges what was done to them. How do we prove something that happened in 1863? We find evidence, records, testimony. They're all dead. Maria smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. Not all of them. There are other spirits in these mountains, Solomon. Lots of other spirits. We just have to find the ones who were there. So we went hunting for ghosts to testify in a trial that happened over a century ago. Because sometimes the dead need lawyers too. Finding ghosts turned out to be easier than I expected. The mountain was full of them. Maria could see them now. The connection to the fire spirits had opened something in her, made her sensitive to all the dead things still walking around. She'd point to empty spots in the forest and say, "There, a Confederate soldier died at 2nd Manassas." Or, "There, a Cherokee hunter died 300 years ago." Most of them didn't talk. They just repeated their last moments over and over, trapped in their own final loop. But some were aware. Some remembered. We found a Union corporal named Mitchell N. near the South Fork, still walking his patrol route from 1864. When Maria spoke to him, he stopped and stared at her like he'd been waiting to talk to someone for over 100 years. "I remember them," Mitchell said when Maria asked about the burned men. "The ones Colonel Bradford killed. They didn't desert. They saw what he was doing, stealing from the army, selling to the Confederates. Bradford couldn't let them live." "Would you testify to that?" Maria asked. Mitchell nodded. "I would have back then, but Bradford threatened to have me shot too. I kept quiet. I'm sorry I kept quiet." We found 3 more witnesses over the next 2 days. A Confederate captain who'd bought supplies from Bradford, a civilian teamster who'd transported the stolen goods, and Bradford's own lieutenant who'd refused to participate in the execution. "He ordered me to seal the cave," the lieutenant's spirit said. His name was Porter, and he looked miserable even in death. I said no. He had someone else do it. I heard them screaming as they burned. I killed myself 2 months later. Couldn't live with the sound. By the end of the week, we had 6 witnesses, 6 ghosts willing to testify. Now we just needed a judge. "The Cherokee had fire spirits too," Maria said. "Fire keepers. Sacred spirits that maintained balance. If we can find one, they can officiate." That's how I ended up hiking to the oldest part of the Massanutten Range with a woman who was slowly turning into a fire spirit herself. Maria's temperature was over 104 degrees now, but she wasn't sick. Her skin glowed slightly in the dark. When she breathed out, I could see heat shimmer in the air. "I'm running out of time," she said. "If we don't do this soon, I'll become one of them completely. I'll forget who I was." We found the Cherokee firekeeper in a grove of ancient oaks, where the Cherokee had performed ceremonies before the Europeans came. She appeared as an old woman made of smoke and red embers, her eyes kind but stern. Maria spoke to her in a language I didn't understand. The firekeeper listened, then nodded. She'll judge the case, Maria translated, but it has to be done in the place where they died, in Hell's Throat, tonight. So at sunset, we went back to the cave. We brought the ghost witnesses with us. Maria could somehow make them follow, pulling them along like she was tugging on invisible strings. The firekeeper came too, floating along behind us like a small campfire that had learned to walk. Inside the cave chamber, the fire spirits were waiting, 6 pillars of flame in human shape, still wearing the remnants of their burning uniforms. They didn't attack us. They just watched, their fire eyes filled with hope and rage in equal measure. The trial was nothing like a real trial. There was no jury, no prosecutor, no defense attorney. Just the firekeeper sitting on a limestone outcrop like a judge's bench, and witnesses telling their stories to the dead men who'd never gotten to tell theirs. Mitchell testified first, then the Confederate captain, then the teamster, then Lieutenant Porter, who cried tears of fire as he admitted his cowardice. The fire spirits listened to every word. When the witnesses finished, the firekeeper spoke. Her voice sounded like crackling wood, like the heart of a campfire on a cold night. "The evidence is clear," Maria translated. "These men were innocent. They were murdered. Their deaths were unjust." The fire spirits blazed brighter, joy and vindication mixing in their flames. "But," the firekeeper continued, and the temperature in the cave dropped 10 degrees. "Innocence does not excuse what they have become. They have taken innocent lives in their anger. They have become the very thing that killed them, unjust executioners." The fire spirits dimmed. One of them, the one who'd been a sergeant, Maria said, spoke in that wind-through-chimneys voice. "We want justice. We want Bradford punished." "Bradford is dead," the firekeeper said. "Dead these 100 years. Then his sons, his grandsons, his blood. They did not burn you. They carry his name, not his guilt." "Then what?" the sergeant roared, and the cave shook. "What justice can there be for us?" I stepped forward before I could stop myself. "Truth," I said. "We can give you the truth. We can tell your story. We can clear your names." The fire spirits turned to me. Being the focus of their attention was like standing inside a furnace. "The Army has records," I continued. "We can get them changed. We can prove Bradford was corrupt and you were innocent. We can make sure everyone knows you died for trying to do the right thing." "And then?" the sergeant asked. "Then you rest," Maria said softly. "You've been burning for over a century. Don't you want to rest?" The fire spirits were silent for a long time. Then, one by one, they dimmed, their flames banking to low embers. "We want a memorial," the sergeant said finally. "Something that lasts. Something that remembers us." "Done," I said. "I promise." The firekeeper stood. "Then it is decided. The spirits will cease their hunting. The living will restore their honor. The mountain will be at peace." She touched each fire spirit with a hand made of smoke, and as she did, they transformed. The angry flames became softer, warmer, more like candlelight than wildfire. They were still fire, but they weren't hungry anymore. Last, she touched Maria. The glow under Maria's skin faded, and she collapsed. I caught her before she hit the ground. Her fever was breaking, her temperature dropping back to normal. "The connection is severed," the firekeeper said. "She will not become what they are. But she will remember, and she will speak for those who cannot speak." Then the firekeeper faded, and we were alone in the cave with 6 gentle lights that had once been vengeful spirits. We left them there, peaceful at last, to wait for the memorial we'd promised. It took 6 months to cut through the red tape. Military records from the Civil War aren't easy to change, even with evidence. But Marie, I was stubborn, and I was patient, and the ghosts we'd found were willing to appear to anyone who needed convincing. Turns out, when a Confederate captain's ghost materializes in a historian's office and confirms your story, people start taking you seriously. The memorial was dedicated on April 14, 1970. A simple stone marker near the cave entrance, listing 6 names and 6 ranks, with an inscription, "These men died unjustly on November 12, 1863. They were innocent of the charges against them. They died with honor, and they are remembered with honor." Below that, in smaller letters, "May their fire warm us, not consume us." The dedication ceremony was weird. About 40 people showed up, descendants of both Union and Confederate soldiers, historians, other rangers, even a few curious reporters. Chief Patterson gave a speech about justice delayed but not denied. Maria spoke about the importance of remembering the forgotten. And when I lit the eternal flame that would burn beside the marker, fed by natural gas from the mountain itself, I swear I felt 6 presences standing there with us, grateful, at peace. Maria stayed on as a ranger. Her experience in the cave changed her. She could still sense spirits, still feel the heat of supernatural fire, but she'd learned to control it. She became our liaison to what she called the other residents of the forest, the ones who'd been there long before the National Park Service. The fire spirits kept their promise. They stopped hunting, but they didn't disappear completely. Sometimes, when there's a wildfire danger, hikers report seeing strange lights moving through the forest, orange and red, like flames walking on their own. But instead of spreading fire, the lights seem to contain it, creating breaks, redirecting the flames away from campgrounds and trails. The hungry fire had become protective fire. The hunters had become guardians. I still walk these mountains every day. I still check for illegal campfires and careless smokers. But now, sometimes, I walk with companions that most people can't see. 6 spirits who died in flames and learned to live in them. They protect their mountain now, and in return, I make sure no one forgets their names. Last month, a group of kids asked me about the memorial. "Who were they?" one girl asked. "Why did they get their own monument?" I told her the truth. 6 men who saw something wrong and tried to stop it. 6 men who died for doing the right thing. 6 men who became monsters in their anger, but found their way back to being human. Or close enough, anyway. "Cool," the girl said, which is about the best you can hope for from a 10-year-old. That night, I dreamed about the cave again. But this time, the men weren't burning. They were standing in the firelight, whole and healthy, their uniforms clean, and their faces at peace. The sergeant looked at me and nodded. "Thank you," he said. When I woke up, I could smell smoke on my pillow. But it wasn't the angry smoke of wildfire or the hungry smoke of a spirit's rage. It was wood smoke, campfire smoke, the good kind that smells like coffee brewing and morning breaking and people sitting together in the warmth, the kind of fire that protects instead of consumes, the kind we should have had all along. My name is Jeremiah Darkwater, and I've been a park ranger at Shenandoah National Park for 21 years. I've tracked escaped convicts through these mountains, found lost children before hypothermia set in, and once cornered a black bear that had developed a taste for camper food. I can read broken twigs and disturbed leaves like other people read newspapers. I thought I'd seen everything these woods could throw at me. I was wrong. People think a ranger's job is all about pointing tourists towards scenic overlooks and making sure campfires get put out properly. That's part of it, sure. But I'm also law enforcement. I carry a gun, make arrests, investigate crimes. My badge means something in these 200,000 acres of Virginia wilderness. My grandmother was Cherokee, and she taught me to track before I could ride a bike. My grandfather was a coal miner from West Virginia who showed me every cave and hollow in these mountains. This park is in my blood. It was early September 1986 when the calls started coming in. Skyline Drive was packed with leaf peepers hoping to catch early fall colors. The weather was perfect. Crisp mornings, warm afternoons, clear skies. Should have been a routine week. The first report came from a couple in their 50s, the Hendersons. They'd been hiking the White Oak Canyon Trail, an easy 4-mile loop that hundreds of people walk every week. Bill Henderson came into the ranger station with his wife, Martha, both of them looking pale and shaken. "We were being followed," Bill said. his hands shaking as he gripped his coffee cup. But it wasn't a person. It was... God, you're going to think we're crazy. I've learned not to judge. People see all kinds of things in the woods when they're tired and scared. Shadows can look like bears. Wind in the trees sounds like voices. I pulled out my incident report form and clicked my pen. "Tell me what you saw," Martha spoke up, her voice quiet. "It was our shadow. I mean, not our shadow exactly. We were walking toward the waterfall around 2 in the afternoon, sun directly overhead. Our shadows were right beneath us, just small dark spots on the trail." She paused, looking at her husband like she needed permission to continue. "Then I noticed a shadow next to mine," she went on. "A person-shaped shadow. But when I looked around, there was nobody there. Just trees and rocks. The shadow moved when I moved, but it was separate from mine. Like someone invisible was walking right beside me." Bill nodded. "I thought she was seeing things at first. Then I saw it too. A third shadow on the ground between us. It kept pace with us for maybe half a mile. Then it moved ahead of us on the trail, just slid across the ground and disappeared around a bend." I wrote it all down, asking the usual questions. Were they on any medications? Had they been drinking? How much sleep had they gotten? They insisted they were stone sober and well rested. I told them it was probably just a trick of the light, maybe another hiker moving through the trees casting odd shadows. They didn't look convinced, but they thanked me and left. I would have forgotten about it completely if 3 more reports hadn't come in over the next week. A solo hiker named David Chen swore his shadow split in 2 on the trail, with one shadow walking off into the woods while he kept moving forward. A family with 2 kids claimed their shadows started acting out a different scene than what they were doing. The shadow children appeared to be running and screaming while the real kids stood perfectly still. A teenage couple reported their shadows holding hands, even after they'd gotten into an argument and separated on the trail. I started keeping a map, marking each incident location with a pin. They clustered around the old CCC camp area. The Civilian Conservation Corps had built trails and facilities here back in the 1930s. Most of those structures were gone now, torn down or reclaimed by the forest. But the tunnels they'd dug remained, blocked off with iron gates after some tragic cave-ins had killed workers back in the day. My supervisor, Chief Ranger Tom Williams, thought I was wasting time. "Jeremiah, tourists see Bigfoot every other week. Remember that guy who swore he photographed a UFO that turned out to be a streetlight reflecting off his RV window? People's eyes play tricks on them in the woods." He wasn't wrong, but something about these reports felt different. The witnesses weren't the usual attention seekers or conspiracy theorists. They were ordinary people who seemed genuinely disturbed by what they'd experienced. Then Rachel Morrison went missing. Rachel was an experienced hiker, 32 years old, a school teacher from Richmond who came to Shenandoah almost every weekend. She knew these trails better than some of my rangers. When she didn't check in at the trail register after a day hike, her boyfriend called it in immediately. We found her 2 days later. She was sitting on a rock near Dark Hollow Falls, staring at the water. When we called her name, she didn't respond. When we touched her shoulder, she screamed like we were murdering her. It took 3 of us to get her down the mountain. She kept looking over her shoulder, whispering, "It knows my name. It knows everything about me." At the hospital, the doctors said she was severely dehydrated and hypothermic despite the warm weather. Physically, she'd be fine. Mentally, that was another story. I visited her the next day. She was calmer, but her eyes had a haunted look I recognized from soldiers I'd known who'd seen combat. "Ranger Darkwater," she said when I entered her room. "Did you find it?" "Find what, Rachel?" "My shadow. It took my shadow." I pulled up a chair. "Tell me what happened." Her hands twisted the bedsheet. "I was hiking the Rose River Loop. Beautiful day, not another soul around. I sent to us top to take a photo of a fox. This gorgeous red fox just sitting on the trail watching me. When I looked down at my phone screen, I noticed something weird. In the photo, the fox had a shadow. The trees had shadows. The rocks had shadows. But I didn't. She took a shaky breath. I looked down at the ground. No shadow. The sun was right there, bright and clear, and I had no shadow. I thought maybe I was standing in a weird spot, so I moved around. Nothing. It was like I didn't exist. Could have been the angle of the sun. That's what I told myself, she interrupted. But then I saw it. My shadow was 30 feet away, standing next to a tree, just standing there, facing me. I could see the shape of my hair, my backpack, everything, but it wasn't attached to me. I stayed quiet, letting her talk. It started walking toward me, not sliding across the ground like a normal shadow, walking, taking steps, and as it got closer, I heard it whispering. It was saying my name, but it also said other things. Private things. It knew about the time I cheated on a test in high school. It knew about the student I'd reported for plagiarism last year. It knew about my sister's drinking problem that nobody's supposed to know about. How could it know those things? Her voice rose, panic creeping back in. I ran. I ran as fast as I could, but it followed me. Every time I looked back, it was there, getting closer. Sometimes it would be behind me. Sometimes it would appear in front of me like it could move anywhere it wanted. It kept calling my name, kept saying things only I should know. It wanted me to follow it into the woods, away from the trail. It promised to show me things, secret things. She grabbed my wrist, her grip surprisingly strong. I almost went. That's the worst part. I almost followed it. Part of me wanted to know what it would show me. But then I remembered a story my grandmother told me about things in the woods that wear familiar faces to lure you away. So I ran to the falls and sat down on the rocks and closed my eyes. I wouldn't look at it anymore. I stayed there until you found me. I didn't know what to say. In all my years as a ranger, I'd never heard anything like this. Rachel, did you see anyone else on the trail? Any other hikers? She shook her head. Just the shadow. Just my shadow that wasn't mine anymore. After leaving the hospital, I drove straight to the Rose River Loop trailhead. I needed to see the location for myself. The afternoon sun was low, casting long shadows through the trees. Everything looked normal, just another pretty trail through Virginia hardwood forest. I walked the path Rachel would have taken, looking for anything unusual. At first, nothing stood out. Then I saw the fox. It was dead, lying just off the trail. No visible injuries, no blood. It looked like it had simply laid down and died. That happened sometimes. Animals got sick or old. But when I knelt down next to it, I noticed something that made my skin crawl. The fox had no shadow. The sun was hitting it directly. Every rock, every leaf, every blade of grass around it cast a shadow. But the fox itself cast nothing. The ground beneath it showed no dark shape, no outline. It was like the animal existed in a different world than everything around it. I pulled out my camera and took several photos, making sure to capture the impossible lack of shadow. Then I heard something behind me. Footsteps. I turned around, my hand going automatically to the gun on my hip. The trail was empty. But there on the ground, clear as day, was a shadow of a person standing exactly where the footsteps had stopped. A person-shaped patch of darkness on the sunlit trail. And it was moving. I watched that shadow for a full minute, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. It stood there, motionless at first, then slowly raised one arm and pointed deeper into the woods, away from the trail, away from safety. Every instinct I had screamed at me to run. But I'm a ranger. This is my park. Whatever this thing was, it was my job to deal with it. "Who are you?" I said, feeling stupid talking to a shadow. It didn't answer. Instead, it turned and started walking. Not sliding, walking, off the trail into the underbrush. I could see the shape of legs moving, feet stepping over roots and rocks. A shadow with nothing casting it, moving through the forest like it owned the place. I followed it. I know that was stupid. I know that's exactly what it wanted me to do. But I was a law enforcement ranger with 21 years of experience, and I'd be damned if I'd let some impossible shadow scare me off my own land. The shadow led me deeper into the woods, away from any marked trails. We were heading toward the old CCC camp area where those workers had died in the cave-ins back in the 30s. The forest got darker here, the trees closer together. Less sunlight made it through the canopy. Then I realized something that made my blood run cold. As the light got dimmer, the shadow got darker, stronger, more solid-looking. In full sunlight, it had been gray and faint. Here in the shadows of the deep woods, it was black as ink, its edges sharp and clear. It stopped at the entrance to one of the old tunnels. The iron gate had been pried open, recently, from the looks of the bent metal. The shadow gestured toward the dark opening, then disappeared into the blackness inside. I clicked on my flashlight and keyed my radio. "Dispatch, this is Ranger Darkwater. I'm at the north entrance to the CCC tunnel system. The gate's been forced. Going in to investigate." Static crackled back. "Copy that, Darkwater. Want me to send backup?" I should have said yes. Instead, I said, "Negative. Probably just kids messing around. I'll call if I need support." The tunnel smelled like wet stone and old earth. My flashlight beam cut through absolute darkness, showing rough rock walls and a floor covered in decades of dirt and debris. Water dripped somewhere in the distance. The tunnel sloped downward, heading deep into the mountain. 20 feet in, I found the first body. It was old, very old, just bones and rotted clothing. The fabric looked like it was from the 1930s, what was left of a CCC uniform. The skeleton lay face down, arms stretched forward like it had been crawling, trying to escape something. I knelt down to examine it closer, and that's when I noticed the walls. They were covered in shadows, dozens of them. Human-shaped shadows frozen in positions of terror, running, falling, reaching out. But there was nothing casting these shadows, no bodies, no objects, just the silhouettes themselves, burned into the rock like photographs. Then they started moving. All at once, every shadow on the walls began to shift and writhe. Arms reached toward me. Mouths opened in silent screams. They peeled away from the rock surface, becoming three-dimensional, solid-looking figures of pure darkness. I ran. I ran back toward the entrance faster than I'd run in my entire life, my flashlight beam bouncing crazily off the walls. Behind me, I could hear them coming. Dozens of footsteps that made no sound but somehow made the air pressure change, like a crowd of people running through the tunnel behind me. I burst out into the fading daylight and kept running until I reached my truck. My hands shook so bad it took 3 tries to get the key in the ignition. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing those shadows on the tunnel walls, the way they'd moved and reached for me. Around 3 a.m. I gave up and made coffee. That's when I noticed something that made me drop the mug. On my kitchen floor, lit by the moonlight coming through the window, my shadow was doing something I wasn't doing. I was standing still, but my shadow was pacing back and forth. I raised my hand. My shadow didn't move. I waved my arms. My shadow kept pacing like it was worried or anxious, like it was trying to figure something out. "What do you want?" I whispered. My shadow stopped pacing. It turned to face me, even though I wasn't moving. Then it pointed toward the cabinet where I kept my old case files. Moving slowly, feeling like I was in a dream, I opened the cabinet and pulled out the box of files. My shadow pointed to a specific folder, cases from 1985. I opened it. Inside was a missing person report I'd filed last year. James Holloway, age 29, experienced outdoorsman. Disappeared while hiking alone near the CCC camp area. We'd searched for 3 weeks and found nothing. Eventually, we'd had to call it off. His body was never recovered. My shadow tapped the paper, insistent. "He's in the tunnels," I said, understanding. "That's what you're trying to tell me." My shadow nodded. Actually nodded, moving its head up and down. Then it pointed to the phone. I called the ranger station and woke up Chief Williams. "Tom, I need a full team and search and rescue equipment at the CCC tunnels tomorrow morning. I know where James Holloway is." "Jeremiah, it's 3 in the morning. What the hell are you—" "Just trust me, please." There was a long pause. "Fine, we'll be there at dawn. This better not be a wild goose chase." I looked at my shadow. It was back to normal now, mimicking my movements exactly. But I'd seen what I'd seen. These shadows weren't evil, at least not all of them. Some of them were trying to help, trying to communicate. The question was, what did they want in return? We found James Holloway's body 30 feet inside the tunnel, along with 6 other missing hikers from the past 5 years. All dead. All positioned like they'd been trying to crawl away from something. Chief Williams stood at the tunnel entrance, his face gray. Jesus, Jeremiah, how did you know? I couldn't tell him the truth. Not yet. Just had a hunch. Old case files got me thinking. We spent the next week recovering bodies and investigating the tunnels. That's when Dr. Helen Nightshade showed up. She was a criminal psychologist from the FBI, brought in to help profile whoever was killing hikers in our park. It's a classic serial killer pattern, she said during our first meeting. Remote location, vulnerable victims, hidden disposal site. We're looking for a local with intimate knowledge of these mountains. Probably male, mid-30s to 50s, someone who blends in. Could even be, no offense, a park employee. It's not a person, I said. She raised an eyebrow. Excuse me? It's not a person killing people. It's something else. For the next hour, I told her everything. The shadow sightings, Rachel Morrison's story, my experience in the tunnel, my shadow's behavior in my kitchen. I showed her the photos of the shadowless fox. I laid out all the witness statements with their locations marked on the map. Dr. Nightshade listened politely, made notes, and then said, Ranger Darkwater, mass hysteria is a well-documented psychological phenomenon. When people are frightened, they influence each other. One person sees something strange, tells others, and suddenly everyone's seeing shadows that act weird. It's suggestion, not reality. Then explain the bodies. A human killer who's very good at not leaving evidence. We'll catch him. But she didn't catch anyone, because there was no one to catch. More people went missing. Sarah Chen disappeared on the Appalachian Trail section that runs through the park. Marcus Washington vanished during a day hike with his kids. His children said his shadow walked away, and their father followed it into the woods. An elderly couple, the Johnsons, were found 3 days later sitting on a rock outcropping, completely catatonic. When they finally spoke, they said their shadows had shown them the dark between, whatever that meant. Dr. Nightshade and I worked together despite our disagreement about what we were dealing with. She was smart and thorough, and I had to admit, part of me wanted her to be right. A human killer would be terrifying, but at Leo, it would make sense. Then her shadow started stalking her. We were reviewing case files in the ranger station when I noticed it. Her shadow on the wall wasn't matching her movements. She was sitting still, but her shadow was leaning forward, reaching toward the photos spread across the table. Helen, I said quietly, don't move. Just look at your shadow. She glanced at the wall and froze. Her shadow was now standing, even though she was sitting. It was moving around the room, examining our evidence board, pointing at specific locations on the map. That's impossible, she whispered. You still think this is mass hysteria? Her shadow stopped moving and turned to face her directly. Then it did something I'll never forget. It waved. Dr. Nightshade fainted. When she came to, she was shaking. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I didn't believe you. What the hell are these things? I think I know someone who might have answers. Joseph Shadowheart was 84 years old and lived on the Cherokee Reservation 40 miles from the park. He was my grandmother's cousin, a keeper of traditional stories. I'd visited him throughout my childhood, listening to tales I'd half believed back then. Now I believed every word. Shadow walkers, he said when we explained what was happening. He sat in his chair, wrapped in a blanket despite the warm evening. My grandfather told me about them. They're spirits of people who died in darkness, trapped between the world of light and the world of shadow. They exist in both places at once, never fully in either. How do we stop them? Dr. Nightshade asked. You don't stop them. You help them. He explained that shadow walkers weren't evil. They were lost. During the forced removal of Cherokee people from these mountains in the 1830s, many had hidden in caves to avoid the soldiers. Some had died in those caves, alone in the darkness. Their spirit had attached to their shadows, the last thing they'd seen before death. Now they existed in a half-world, unable to fully die, unable to fully live. The CCC workers who died in the cave-ins, I said. They're shadow walkers too? Joseph nodded. Any death in complete darkness can create one. They're not evil, but they're angry, confused. They remember being alive, remember the light, but they can't reach it anymore, so they try to pull living people into their world. Not to kill them, to communicate, to be remembered. Rachel Morrison said her shadow knew things about her, Dr. Nightshade said. Personal things. Shadow walkers can see everything your shadow sees. They know all your secrets, all the things you hide from the light. That's why they're so frightening. They know you better than you know yourself. How do we help them? I asked. Acknowledge them. Tell their stories. Bring light to where they died. They don't need to be destroyed. They need to be seen, remembered, honored. That night, Dr. Nightshade lost her shadow completely. We were in her motel room going through Joseph's instructions when I noticed she cast no shadow under the lamplight. She looked down at her feet and started crying. It's taking me, she said. I can feel it. I'm being pulled somewhere else. She was fading, literally fading. Her skin was becoming transparent, like she was turning into a shadow herself. We have to go to the tunnels, I said. Now. We drove to the CCC camp at midnight. I'd gathered equipment based on Joseph's instructions: mirrors, flashlights, white sage, and a portable generator with industrial-strength lights. Dr. Nightshade was barely visible anymore, a ghost of herself. Inside the tunnel, the shadow walkers were waiting. They stood in groups along the walls and floor, dozens of human-shaped patches of darkness. As we entered, they began to move toward us. My own shadow detached from my feet and joined them, standing between me and the crowd. I see you, I said loudly, my voice echoing. I know you died here. I know you suffered. I'm sorry. Ray, no one remembered you. I'm sorry you were left alone in the darkness. The shadow walkers stopped moving. Tell me your names, I continued. Tell me who you were. One by one, they began to communicate. Not with voices, but with images reflected in the mirrors I'd set up. The mirrors showed me scenes from their lives and deaths. Cherokee people hiding from soldiers, dying of cold and starvation in the dark caves. CCC workers crushed by falling rock, their lanterns extinguished, dying in absolute blackness. Hikers who'd gotten lost and fallen into hidden shafts, and James Holloway, who'd been lured into the tunnels by shadow walkers who just wanted someone to see them, to acknowledge their existence. He'd died of dehydration, unable to find his way out while the shadows had watched and waited. I see you all, I said, and I promise. I'll make sure everyone knows you were here. I'll make sure you're remembered. I turned on the industrial lights. The generator roared, and brilliant white light flooded the tunnel. The shadow walkers didn't burn or disappear. Instead, they became clearer, more defined. I could see details in their forms now: clothing, faces, expressions. They were smiling. Dr. Nightshade began to solidify again, color returning to her skin. Her shadow flowed back to her feet, reattaching itself. She gasped, touching her face with solid hands. They're not angry anymore, she whispered. She was right. The shadow walkers weren't reaching for us or trying to pull us into their world. They were simply there, present, visible, acknowledged. One shadow moved forward, larger than the others, with the distinctive features of a Cherokee elder. This was the shaman Joseph had told us about, the leader of the shadow walkers. More images appeared in the mirrors. He showed me his death in 1838, hiding in these caves from soldiers, watching his people being driven away. He showed me his anger at being forgotten, his rage at the injustices that had killed him and so many others. He showed me the CCC workers, dying in the same darkness decades later. He showed me how the darkness had collected them all, creating an army of shadow walkers who'd become increasingly desperate to be seen. But he also showed me something else. He showed me that acknowledgement was enough. Memory was enough. They didn't need revenge, they needed recognition. I understand, I said, and I'll make this right. It took 6 months to make it right. We designated the CCC tunnel system as a memorial site, working with the Cherokee Nation to create a proper remembrance for both the indigenous people who'd died in the caves and the CCC workers who'd perished in the cave-ins. We installed lights, permanent powerful lights that would never go out. We mounted plaques with names, as many names as we could recover from historical records. Dr. Nightshade, now fully recovered but forever changed, helped develop a new protocol for law enforcement dealing with unexplained disappearances. She couldn't publish papers about actual shadow walkers, that would end her career, but she wrote carefully worded articles about unusual psychological phenomena in remote areas and environmental factors in mass hysteria cases. Other professionals who'd encountered similar situations could read between the lines and understand what she was really saying. The shadow walker attacks stopped. The missing persons cases ended. Hikers still reported strange shadow behavior occasionally, but never with the same malevolent intent. The shadow walkers had what they needed: acknowledgement, remembrance, light in the darkness where they'd died. My own shadow went back to normal mostly. Sometimes, late at night when I'm working on case files, I notice it moving independently, pointing things out, helping me solve problems. I've learned to trust it. After all, it saved Dr. Nightshade's life and helped us understand what the shadow walkers really wanted. The government tried to get involved, of course. Some shadowy military program, no pun intended, wanted to recruit shadow walkers for espionage. Imagine spies that can travel through shadows, a man in a suit told me. Invisible, untraceable. I showed him what happened to the 3 soldiers who tried to enter the tunnels without permission. They lost their shadows to the walkers, and those shadows never came back. The soldiers didn't die, but they were never the same, hollow, faded versions of themselves. The program was quietly disbanded. I still patrol the park every day, still track lost hikers, still deal with bears and campfires and tourists who think they saw Bigfoot. But now I patrol both worlds, the world of light and the world of shadow. Because that's what I learned from all this. The shadows aren't separate from us. They're part of us. They're where we store the things we don't want to see, the truths we hide from the light. The shadow walkers weren't monsters. They were victims who'd been forgotten, pushed into darkness and ignored. Sometimes on very clear days when the sun is directly overhead, I visit the memorial. The tunnel entrance is well maintained now, the lights always burning. Through the iron gate, I can see the shadow walkers inside. They're not menacing anymore. They're just there, existing, remembered. One shadow always comes to the gate when I visit. The Cherokee shaman, the leader of the shadow walkers. We don't speak, he can't speak, and I wouldn't know what to say anyway. But we acknowledge each other, a nod of respect between a ranger and a spirit who guards the dead. Last week, a young couple came to me with a familiar story. Their shadows were acting strange on the trail. But when I investigated, I found it was just tree branches casting odd shapes in the late afternoon sun. False alarm. Not every shadow is a shadow walker. Most of the time, a shadow is just a shadow. WW. But I check. Every time I check. Because I learned something important in those tunnels. Something that changed how I see my job and my world. Everything that exists casts a shadow, and everything that's forgotten lives in darkness, waiting to be brought back into the light. That's my job now, not just to protect the people who visit this park, but to remember the ones who died here, to keep their stories alive, to make sure the darkness is never complete. The shadow between trees isn't always a threat. Sometimes it's just a reminder that light and dark exist together, and both deserve to be seen. My name is Jeremiah Darkwater, and I've been a park ranger at Shenandoah National Park for 21 years. I've seen things that would make most people question reality. But I don't question it anymore. I just make sure the lights stay on. My name is Nathaniel Greycloak, and I've been a ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains for 20 years. People think that's a strange last name, but it comes from my Scottish ancestors who settled these mountains back in the 1800s. My mama was Cherokee, though, so I grew up hearing stories from both sides. Scottish tales about ghost fog and Cherokee legends about cloud people. I never believed any of it. Not until the mist started taking people. I'm 43 now, and I know these mountains better than most people know their own backyards. I can tell you what the weather will do 3 days out just by watching how the fog moves through the valleys. I've pulled lost hikers out of places that would make your skin crawl, guided rescue teams through storms that could kill you in an hour. I'm good at my job because I respect the mountains, and I stay calm when things go wrong. But last September, things went wrong in a way I couldn't explain. It started with the Henderson group, 8 experienced hikers who knew what they were doing. They went out on a Tuesday morning for a day hike near Cataract Falls. Weather was perfect, visibility clear. They had maps, supplies, radios, everything right. They vanished. We searched for 3 days. Helicopters, search dogs, volunteer teams combing every trail and creek bed. The fog rolled in thick that week, which made it harder, but we've searched in worse. On the 3rd day, we found them wandering out of the woods separately, miles apart from each other. That's when I knew something was really wrong. I was there when we brought in Mrs. Henderson. She was 52 years old when she started that hike. The woman we found looked 70. Her hair had gone completely white. Her face was lined with wrinkles that hadn't been there 3 days before. She kept touching her hands like she didn't recognize them. "Where have you been?" I asked her, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. She was shaking even though it wasn't cold. She looked at me with empty eyes. "I don't know. I remember walking into fog. Then, nothing. Was I gone long?" "3 days, ma'am." 3 days. She started crying. It felt like minutes, just minutes in the white. All 8 of them said the same thing. Walked into fog, remembered nothing, came out aged and confused. The doctors couldn't explain it. They ran every test. Nothing. No drugs in their systems, no head injuries, no medical reason for what happened to them. But I saw their hands shaking when anyone mentioned the fog. I saw how they wouldn't look at the mountains anymore. The Park Service wanted to call it a group panic attack. Stress-induced amnesia. They wanted to move on. But I couldn't. I've seen panic attacks. I've seen people crack under pressure. This wasn't that. I started paying attention to the fog after that. Really paying attention. The Smokies are famous for fog. That's where the name comes from. But the fog that fall was different. It would appear out of nowhere, even when conditions were wrong for it. I'd be standing on a ridge in clear weather, and suddenly a wall of white would roll up the mountain, moving fast, moving wrong. Fog doesn't move against the wind. Fog doesn't form perfect spheres. Fog doesn't choose where it goes. This fog did. I tried talking to my supervisor about it. "Jim, something's off with these fog patterns. We should close some trails until we figure it out." He laughed. "Nate, you've been out here too long. It's just fog. Weather's been weird all year." Maybe he was right. Maybe I was losing it. 20 years in these mountains. Maybe they were finally getting to me. Then I met Dr. Sarah Wyndham. Sarah was a meteorologist from the university, studying unusual weather patterns in the Smokies. She showed up at the ranger station with boxes of equipment and a no-nonsense attitude that immediately made half the rangers fall in love with her. She was 38, sharp as a tack, and she thought all the supernatural talk was complete garbage. "Ranger Greycloak," she said, shaking my hand with a grip that could crush walnuts. "I hear you've been noticing strange fog patterns." "That's right." "Great. I need someone who knows the terrain. I'm setting up weather monitoring stations at various elevations. The fog formations here don't match any models I've seen." "You think there's a scientific explanation?" She gave me a look like I'd asked if the sky was blue. "Of course there is. There's always a scientific explanation. Let's find it." I liked her immediately, even if I thought she was wrong. We spent 2 weeks hiking to different locations, setting up her equipment. She was tough, kept up with me on trails that winded most people, and she asked good questions, really listening to my answers about how the mountains worked. The Cherokee called this place Shakinaj, I told her one afternoon as we installed sensors near Cataract Falls. Place of blue smoke. They had stories about spirits in the fog. Mm-hmm, she said, not looking up from her laptop. And the Scottish settlers had similar stories, right? Classic pattern. Humans see weather phenomena, create narratives to explain them. It's how we process the unknown. What if the unknown isn't just weather? She looked at me then, really looked. Nate, I respect you. But if we're going to work together, I need you to stay objective. Deal? Deal. That was a Thursday. On Friday, everything changed. We were checking the sensors near the falls when the fog came. I saw it first. A wall of white moving up the valley, fast and thick. Too fast. Sarah, I said quietly, we need to leave. Now. She was looking at her instruments, frowning. That's impossible. The temperature's wrong. The humidity's wrong. There's no reason for fog to... Sarah, we need to go. The fog hit us like a physical thing. 1 second I could see the trail, the next second. And I couldn't see my own hand in front of my face. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds. And the silence. God, the silence. No birds, no wind, no sound at all except our breathing. Stay close, I said, reaching for her arm. Don't let go of me. I can't see anything, she whispered. Her hand found mine and gripped tight. We started moving, following the trail from memory. But something was wrong. The ground felt different under my feet. Wrong elevation, wrong slope. We should have been going downhill, but it felt level. Then I heard the voices. They were speaking, but I couldn't understand the words. Not English, not Cherokee. It sounded like Gaelic. My grandmother used to speak some Gaelic, and this had that same rhythm, that same musical quality. Do you hear that? I asked. Hear what? The voices. Nate, there's no one here. It's just us. But I could hear them clearly now. A woman calling out, desperate and scared. Children crying. Men shouting orders. All around us, echoing through the white. I pulled Sarah faster. My heart was pounding. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to run, but I couldn't run blind in these mountains. One wrong step, and we'd go over a cliff. Then the fog opened up just a little. I saw shapes moving in the white. People walking past us, not seeing us. A woman in old-fashioned clothes, long dress dragging in the snow. Snow? It wasn't snowing. A man carrying a child, both of them blue with cold. Sarah, tell me you see them. See what? Nate, I can't see anything. Please just get us out of here. The shapes vanished. The fog closed in again, thicker than before. I kept walking, kept Sarah's hand in mine, and prayed I was going the right way. I don't know how long we walked. Could have been minutes, could have been hours. Time felt strange, stretched out and compressed at the same time. Finally, we broke through the fogs into clear air. We were standing in the parking lot at the trailhead, 200 yards from where we'd started. Sarah dropped my hand and bent over, hands on her knees, breathing hard. What the hell was that? I don't know. She checked her watch and went pale. Nate, what time did we enter the fog? Around 2 o'clock. Why? It's 8 p.m. We were in there for 6 hours. That's not possible. We walked maybe 20 minutes. She pulled out her phone with shaking hands, checking the time on 3 different devices. All of them said 8:07 p.m. There has to be an explanation, she said, but her voice was different now, less certain. Equipment malfunction, or we got disoriented, lost time. Sarah, I saw people in that fog, people from another time. She looked at me and I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Fear. Real fear. Let's go back to the station, she said. I need to check my data. We drove in silence. When we got back, she immediately downloaded all the information from her sensors. I watched her face go from confused to shocked to something like terror. What is it? The temperature readings, she said slowly. For 6 hours, every sensor went dark. Complete system failure. All of them at once. That's That's impossible. Or something made them fail. She didn't argue this time. We started seeing the patterns after that. Every few days the fog would appear somewhere in the park, and every time it appeared, people would vanish for hours, then turn up with no memory of what happened. Some aged like the Henderson group. Others came back different in other ways. Personality changes, speaking languages they didn't know, having memories that weren't theirs. Sarah became obsessed with documenting it. She set up cameras, more sensors, tried every scientific tool she had. I went back to the old stories, talking to Cherokee elders and descendants of Scottish settlers. We were coming at the same problem from different directions, but we were both starting to believe the impossible. Thomas Beartrack was my mother's second cousin, a Cherokee elder who still lived in the traditional ways. I drove 2 hours to his place in the Qualla boundary, bringing tobacco, as my mother had taught me. I wondered when you'd come, he said, inviting me into his small house. He was 83, but his eyes were sharp and clear. You know what's happening? The cloud people are restless. They've always been there, in the high places where the fog lives. But something's changed. They're reaching out more, pulling people into their world. What are they? He made me tea before answering, the old way, taking his time. Spirits of those who died in the mountains. Cherokee, settlers, modern people. When someone dies in the fog, sometimes they get trapped there. Between earth and sky, between now and then. They exist in the moment of their death, forever. How do we stop it? You don't stop death, grandson. You respect it. You learn to walk carefully around it. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those shapes in the fog. The woman in the old-fashioned dress. The man carrying a child. How cold they looked. How lost. Sarah called me at 3 a.m. I need you to come to the lab, now. She sounded strange. Different. I found her sitting in the dark, staring at her computer screen. The data showed fog patterns that looked almost like roads, like pathways, connecting different locations across the park. They're moving between places, she said. The fog formations aren't random. They're following paths, old paths, Cherokee trails, and others. Look at this section. It matches an old Scottish settlement route from the 1840s. And this one follows where the CCC boys built roads in the 1930s. It's like... She stopped, struggling with the words. Like the fog remembers where people died. She nodded slowly. Then she said something in another language. Something that sounded like Gaelic. Sarah? What did I'll just say? She looked at me with confused eyes. I don't know. The words just came to me, like someone else was speaking. That's when I realized her accent had changed. She sounded Scottish. When did you start remembering things that aren't yours? I asked carefully. Since the fog, she whispered. I have memories of children. 2 girls and a boy. But I don't have children, Nate. I've never been married. But I can see their faces so clearly. I can hear them calling for me in the snow. She started crying. My name is Margaret McLeod, and I'm looking for my babies. Then she blinked and she was Sarah again, looking terrified. What just happened? What did I say? We need to talk to Thomas Beartrack, tonight. Thomas wasn't surprised when we arrived. He made Sarah sit down, gave her herbs to drink, spoke to her in Cherokee while making signs over her head. Whatever he did seemed to calm her, push back whoever Margaret was. The spirits can possess the living who've been touched by the fog, he explained, especially those who had strong emotions when they died. This Margaret is searching for her children. She died looking for them, and she's still looking, through anyone she can reach. How do I make her go away? Sarah asked, her voice small and scared. You don't. You help her. Find her children. Reunite them. Give her peace. How are we supposed to find ghosts from the 1840s? Go into the fog, Thomas said simply. Go in willingly, with respect and purpose. The spirits will respond to that. Sarah and I looked at each other. This is insane, she said. I know. We're actually talking about walking into supernatural fog to find dead children from almost 200 years ago. Yeah, but we're going to do it anyway. Yeah, because what else could we do? More people were disappearing every week. The fog was spreading, and Sarah was being haunted by a desperate mother who'd been searching for her children for over a century. We spent the next 3 days preparing. I talked to more elders, learning proper protocols for dealing with spirits. Sarah researched the Scottish settlement history, finding records of the MacLeod family. Margaret MacLeod, age 32, died February 1847 during a blizzard. Her children, Catherine, age 8, James, age 6, and little Mary, age 4, died the same night in 3 different locations as they searched for each other in the storm. The family had lived near what was now Cataract Falls. That's where the fog appeared most often. The spirits stay near where they died, Thomas told me, but the children died separately, searching. Margaret's been walking between those places for almost 130 years looking for them. She's tired, she wants to rest, but she won't rest until she finds her babies. On the 4th day, we went back to the falls. The fog was waiting. We entered the fog at dawn, carrying tobacco and cornmeal like Thomas had instructed. This time, we went in with purpose instead of fear. The change was immediate. The white surrounded us, but it felt different now. Less hostile, more aware. "Margaret," Sarah called out, "we're here to help you find your children." Sarah's face changed, her posture shifted. When she spoke again, it was with a Scottish accent, desperate and grieving. "My babies. I can't find my babies. The snow took them. I've been searching so long." "We know where they are, Margaret," I said gently. "We can help you reach them, but you need to show us the way." The fog around us began to move, not randomly, but deliberately, forming paths, opening clearances. I could see through it now, not into the present-day forest, but into different times. I saw Cherokee warriors walking ancient trails, not seeing us. I saw CCC boys working on roads, laughing and calling to each other. I saw Confederate soldiers limping through the mountains. I saw modern hikers from different decades, all of them moving through the fog, all of them treasure, pit in their own moments. "This is the spirit realm," I said, understanding finally. "Everyone who died here. They're all still here, living out their deaths over and over." "Not living," Margaret's voice said through Sarah. "Existing, trapped. The fog holds us in the moments of our passing. We can't move forward, can't move back, only repeat." We walked, and the fog showed us different times and places. I saw a young Cherokee woman gathering herbs. She looked directly at us, smiled, and faded. I saw an old man sitting against a tree, peacefully accepting his death. I saw violence too, people who'd been killed, their deaths playing out again and again. "There," Margaret said, pointing. Through the fog, I saw a small girl in a long dress calling out, "Mama! Mama, where are you? Catherine?" Sarah, Margaret, tried to run toward her, but the fog thickened between them. "I can't reach her. I've tried for so long, but I can't reach her." "Because you're in different death moments," I realized. "You died at the house. She died here, searching for you. You're experiencing different times." "How do we bring them together?" Sarah's own voice broke through, desperate to help. I remembered what Thomas had said about the fog having pathways. The fog connects different moments. If we can bring all 3 children into the same moment, the same place, they'll be able to find each other, and Margaret can reach them. But to do that, we'd have to split up, navigate through different time streams in the fog, find each child, and guide them to a central point. "I'll find James and Mary," I said. "You stay here with Catherine. Call to your children. They'll hear their mother's voice across time." "Nate, if you go out there alone, I know the mountains." And Thomas gave me protection. I touched the small medicine bundle around my neck. "I'll come back." I left Sarah and walked deeper into the fog, letting it take me into different moments. Time became fluid. I passed through a group of settlers from the 1820s, through a Cherokee hunting party from who knows when, through hitchhikers from the 1960s. Each group was real, solid, living out their moments. I found James by a creek, trying to cross icy water. He was crying, calling for his sisters. "James MacLeod," I called. Your mother is looking for you. Come with me." He looked at me with enormous, frightened eyes. "Who are you? Where's Mama?" "I'm going to take you to her." "Give me your hand." He hesitated, then reached out. His hand was cold as ice, but solid. Real. I led him back through the fog, following my instincts and the protection Thomas had given me. The fog tried to pull us into different times, show us different deaths, but I kept walking, kept holding James's hand. Mary was harder to find. She'd wandered far, gotten turned around in the blizzard. I found her sitting in the snow, barely conscious, freezing to death over and over. She was so young, so small. "Mary, your mama sent me. Your brother and sister are waiting." "I'm cold," she whimpered. "So cold." I picked her up. She weighed almost nothing, and carried her. Her arms went around my neck, and she buried her face in my shoulder, crying. A little girl who'd been dying alone for more than a century. When I got back to the central point, Sarah was there with Catherine. James ran to his sister. The fog around us began to change, shimmer, pull back. And then Margaret appeared. Not through Sarah this time, but as herself. A woman in her 30s, wearing a simple dress and shawl, her face exhausted, but lit with desperate hope. She was transparent, more fog than solid, but she was there. "My babies," she breathed. The 3 children saw her and ran. They crashed into her arms, and she held them, sobbing, finally reunited after more than a century of searching. The fog around us began to glow. Other spirits appeared. Cherokee, Scottish, modern hikers, all of them watching. I felt the weight of their attention, their hope. If Margaret could find peace, maybe they could too. "Thank you," Margaret said to me to Sarah. "Thank you." Then they began to fade, the whole family together, finally moving on. But as they faded, the fog began to collapse. Without Margaret's presence holding it together, the temporal boundaries started breaking down. Past and present slammed together. I saw Cherokee warriors next to modern tourists, CCC boys working beside Confederate soldiers. Time was bleeding. "Nate!" Sarah grabbed my arm. "What's happening?" We broke the balance. We freed one family, but destabilized the whole system. The fog churned violently. I could hear screams from different eras, see people from different times colliding, confused and terrified. If this kept spreading, the temporal boundaries could collapse across the entire park. Past and present would merge permanently. "We need to restore balance," I said. "Create a new way for the spirits to exist, without trapping them, but without destroying the boundaries between times." How? I thought about what Thomas had taught me, about respect and harmony, about Cherokee and Scottish traditions both honoring the dead. We need a memorial, a sacred space where the spirits can exist peacefully, not trapped, but not forgotten. Sarah closed her eyes, and I knew Margaret was speaking to her one more time. When she opened them, she nodded. "Margaret says the old cemetery, where her family was buried. That can be the anchor." We ran through the collapsing fog, guiding lost spirits, calling them to follow us. I spoke in Cherokee. Sarah spoke in both English and Gaelic, and somehow the spirits understood. They followed us through the chaos, a procession of the dead from different centuries. At the old cemetery, we found Thomas Beartrack waiting. He'd known. Somehow he'd known we'd need him. Together, we performed a ceremony. Cherokee and Scottish traditions mixed, honoring all the dead, all the lost. The fog responded, began to stabilize, to form something new, not a prison, but a memorial, a place where spirits could exist peacefully, where past and present touched gently instead of violently. The chaos stopped. The fog settled into a permanent mist around the cemetery, beautiful and peaceful. Sarah and I came out of the fog 3 days later. We'd been in there for 72 hours, but it felt like forever, and like no time at all. The Park Service put us on medical leave. Sarah didn't argue. Neither did I. We were both changed in ways that were hard to explain. Sarah kept Margaret's memories, not as a possession, but as a gift, a reminder. She could speak Gaelic now, remembered growing up in Scotland, remembered children who weren't hers but felt like hers. She worked with a therapist who specialized in trauma, trying to integrate these experiences into her life. I published a paper, she told me 6 months later. Documented all the strange readings, the impossible weather patterns. Carefully worded to avoid supernatural explanations, but the data's all there. Other scientists are starting to pay attention. Good. I'm not the same person I was, Nate. None of us are. The fog still appears in the Smokies, but it's different now. The memorial fog around the old cemetery stays there, gentle and peaceful. Visitors report feeling calm there, feeling watched over. Some say they see figures in the mist, Cherokee, Scottish settlers, others. But they're not scary anymore. They're just there, sharing the mountain with the living. I established regular checks on the spirit communities. I talk to them sometimes, through the fog, making sure the balance holds. Thomas taught me the old ways, and I'm teaching younger rangers now. Not everyone believes, but enough do. Enough to keep people safe. We created guidelines for visitors, ways to show respect. Simple things. Don't shout in certain areas, leave offerings, acknowledge the spirits who came before. Most tourists think it's just park rules. The ones who understand, who felt the presence in the fog. They know better. The Henderson group members recovered mostly. They'll never be the same, but they're alive. They have a support group now. People who've experienced the fog and survived. Sarah runs it, helps them process what happened. Jim, my supervisor, finally believes me. Hard not to after he spent 6 hours in the fog himself, came out aged 10 years. He approved funding for the spiritual monitoring program, calls it anomalous weather research in the reports. Whatever works. I'm 44 now, still a ranger, still walking these mountains every day. But I walk differently, with more awareness of what's really here. The Smokies aren't just mountains and trees and trails. They're layers of time, spirits of the past living alongside us, sharing this sacred space. Sometimes I see Margaret at the cemetery fog. She waves. Her children play in the mist, happy now, at peace. Cherokee elders I never met in life nod to me as I pass. CCC boys who died building these trails tip their hats. The mist walkers are still here. They'll always be here. But now we walk together, living and dead, past and present, in an understanding that bridges centuries. Sarah asked me once if I was scared, living with this knowledge, knowing the mountains are full of spirits, that time and death aren't as solid as we thought. No, I told her honestly. I'm at peace. They're at peace. That's all any of us want. The fog rolls through the mountains this morning, soft and beautiful, carrying voices from every era of these ancient hills. I finish my coffee, put on my ranger hat, and head out for patrol. The mist walkers are waiting, and I walk among them, keeping watch over both the living and the dead. My name is Ezra Thornfield, and I've been a ranger in these Virginia mountains for 19 years. I've pulled 247 people out of Jefferson National Forest alive. I've seen things that would make most folks quit. Bear attacks that left people looking like raw meat. Copperhead bites that turned legs black and swollen. Hikers frozen solid after getting lost in winter storms. I thought I'd seen everything these mountains could throw at me. I was wrong. People ask me why I became a ranger. Truth is, these mountains took my grandfather when I was 8 years old. He went out to check his trap lines one October morning and never came back. Search parties looked for 3 weeks. Never found a trace. No body, no clothing, nothing. My grandmother used to say the mountain claimed him, like it was alive and hungry. I always figured that was just her way of dealing with the grief. Now I'm not so sure. It started in late September of 1962. Bent Creek Hollow. That's where it all went wrong. Most rangers won't even talk about that place. It's a valley deep in the forest, about 15 miles from the nearest road. You can only get there by an old logging trail that's more mud than gravel. The hollow sits between 2 ridges that rise over 4,000 feet, and the way those ridges curve around creates weird echoes. Sometimes you'll shout and hear your voice come back 3 or 4 times, each one sounding stranger than the last. The history of that place should have been warning enough. Back in 1847, a group of settlers built a little community there, Bent Creek Settlement, they called it. 47 people living in wooden cabins, farming the bottom land, keeping to themselves. Then, in 1889, every single person vanished overnight. The census records just say, gone. No graves, no bodies, no explanation. The cabins stood empty for years until they finally rotted away. Local folks have said stories about Bent Creek Hollow. They say if you go there at night, you can still hear children playing, laughing and singing like they're having the best time of their lives. Old-timers warn their grandkids to stay away, but people don't listen. Campers think it's just superstition. They see an empty valley with good water and flat ground for tents, and they think they've found paradise. That's what the Morrison family thought. The call came in on a Wednesday morning. A family of 5 had been camping in Bent Creek Hollow for 2 days. The father, Tom Morrison, got on his emergency radio around dawn. His voice was shaking. He said his kids, 3 of them, ages 6 to 12, had been hearing children's voices in the woods all night, singing songs, calling their names. He said it sounded like a whole playground full of kids, but there was nobody else camping anywhere near them. Then the radio cut to static. I grabbed my gear and headed out with Billy Sawyer, a rookie ranger fresh out of training. Billy was 23, eager to prove himself, full of confidence. He'd grown up in Richmond and thought all the mountain stories were nonsense. I tried to tell him that sometimes the old stories exist for a reason, but he just laughed. We reached the hollow by early afternoon. The temperature dropped the moment we crossed into the valley. I'm not talking about a normal temperature change. I mean, it felt like we'd walked into a freezer. My truck's thermometer showed it was 68 degrees outside the hollow and 53 inside. 15 degrees colder for no reason. Billy noticed it too. "That's weird," he said, rubbing his arms. "Everything about this place is weird," I told him. We found the Morrisons' campsite near an old stone foundation, probably what was left of one of the original settlement buildings. The scene made my skin crawl. Their tent was perfectly set up. No rips, no damage. The campfire had been built correctly, surrounded by rocks. On the camp stove, there was a pot of oatmeal that was still slightly warm. Cups of coffee sat on the picnic table, half drunk. It looked like the family had just stood up in the middle of breakfast and walked away. But it was the toys that really got to me. The Morrison kids had brought toys, a teddy bear, some action figures, a doll. Someone had arranged them in perfect circles around 3 dead trees near the campsite. Not scattered like kids had been playing, arranged, with the toys all facing the same direction, looking into the woods. "Maybe the kids did it," Billy said, but his voice wasn't confident anymore. I pulled out my compass to check our bearings. The needle spun in wild circles, never settling. I tapped it, shook it. Nothing changed. "Equipment malfunction?" Billy suggested. I handed him my backup compass. Same thing. The needles just spun and spun. We searched the area, calling out for the family. Our voices echoed back strange, almost mocking. And there was something else wrong, something I couldn't quite put my finger on at first. Then it hit me. Silence. These woods are never silent. There should have been birds, squirrels, insects buzzing. But I couldn't hear a single animal sound. No chirping, no rustling in the leaves. Nothing. And when I looked close, I couldn't find any tracks either. No deer prints, no raccoon trails. It was like every living thing had abandoned the hollow. "Let's check the vehicles," I said. We hiked back up the logging road to where the Morrisons had parked. Their station wagon was there, dusty but intact. The doors were unlocked. And that's when we found something that made my blood run cold. There was another car parked 50 yards away. An old Chevy from the early 50s. I checked the license plate, expired in 1960. The windshield was covered in dirt and leaves. When I looked inside, I had to grab the door handle to keep from falling. 2 skeletons sat in the front seats. The bones were old, yellowed. They wore rotted clothes that might have been nice once. In the back seat, there were 3 sets of children's clothing, neatly folded, tiny shoes lined up in a row, but no children's bones. Billy turned away and threw up in the bushes. "We need to call this in," he said when he could talk again. I tried the radio, nothing but static at first. Then, faint and far away, I heard singing. Children's voices, high and sweet, singing "Ring Around the Rosie," the same song the Morrison kids had supposedly heard. I clicked off the radio fast. We spent the rest of the afternoon searching, but we didn't find the Morrison family. What we did find was more evidence that something was very wrong. Trees with scratch marks 8 feet up, patches of ground where nothing grew, not even moss, and everywhere that unnatural cold. As sunset approached, I wanted to leave. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get out of that hollow. But Billy convinced me to stay. "We can't abandon those people," he said. "What if they're hurt? What if they need help?" He was right, and he was wrong. We couldn't abandon them. But staying was the worst decision I ever made. We set up camp as the sun went down. Our flashlights wouldn't work. The batteries were fresh, but the lights would flicker and die. So we used old-fashioned lanterns, the kind that burn kerosene. The yellow light pushed back the darkness, but barely. I'd asked the Forest Service office to check on us every hour by radio. At 8 p.m., I made contact. "Everything okay?" I reported. At 9 p.m., I tried again. That's when we heard them, children's voices, singing in the darkness beyond our lantern light. "Ring around the Rosie, pocket full of posies." The voices came from everywhere and nowhere. When I spun around trying to find the source, the singing moved, always staying just out of sight. "Ashes, ashes, we all fall down!" Billy grabbed his flashlight. Somehow, it was working now. He shone it into the trees. I saw them. Children, maybe a dozen of them, standing at the edge of the light. They wore old-fashioned clothes, dresses with high collars, wool pants with suspenders. Their skin was pale, almost glowing. And their eyes were completely black. Not just the pupils, the entire eye, socket to socket, like someone had filled them with ink. "Come play with us," they said, all of them together, in perfect unison. "We've been waiting so long for new friends." Billy took a step forward. "Are you the Morrison kids?" he called out. "Billy, don't," I started to say. But he was already walking toward them. The children smiled, and their smiles were too wide, showing too many teeth. "We have games," they said in that awful chorus voice. "Come play in the dark with us." "Billy!" I shouted. He stopped at the edge of the lantern light and looked back at me. For a second I thought he'd listen. Then he shook his head. "They're just kids, Ezra. They might be hurt." He stepped into the darkness. The children scattered like leaves in the wind. I heard Billy running after them, crashing through the brush. I heard him calling out. Then I heard him scream, a sound of pure terror that cut off suddenly, like someone had flipped a switch. I grabbed the lantern and ran after him, but the darkness seemed to swallow the light. I was shouting his name over and over. Nothing answered except my own echo, and even that sounded wrong. I found him 10 minutes later standing in a small clearing. The pale children surrounded him in a circle. Billy stood perfectly still, his arms at his sides. When I got close enough, I saw that his eyes had changed. They were black now, completely black, just like the children's eyes. "Billy?" My voice cracked. He turned to look at me. His movements were jerky, like a puppet on strings. When he spoke, his voice was high and childlike, nothing like the confident young man I'd known. "We showed him the playground," he said. "He wanted to stay and play forever. Don't you want to play too, Mr. Thornfee?" "Ild?" The children moved closer. Behind them I could see something else, a darkness deeper than the night. A cave entrance I hadn't noticed before, hidden behind a small waterfall. The children were backing toward it, pulling Billy with them. "Come see the playground," they sang. "Come see what we made. Come play forever and ever and ever." I had 2 choices. I could run back to the truck and radio for help, or I could follow them into that cave and try to save Billy. I knew what I should do, the smart thing, the safe thing. But I'd already lost my grandfather to these mountains. I wasn't going to lose Billy, too. I followed them into the dark. The cave went deep into the mountain. The walls were wet and cold, and the lantern light made crazy shadows dance. The children led the way, holding Billy's hands. They were humming now, a tune that made my teeth ache. The tunnel opened into a huge underground chamber. What I saw there will haunt me until the day I die. It was a playground, swings and slides and a merry-go-round. But everything was made of bone, human bone, yellowed and ancient, carved and fitted together like some nightmare carpenter had built it. The bone swings hung from chains made of smaller bones linked together. The slide was a long spine curved into shape. The merry-go-round was a circle of skulls with ribs for the seats, and there were children everywhere, dozens of them, all pale, all with black eyes, all wearing clothes from different time periods. Some wore clothes from the 1800s, some from the 1920s, some from just a few years ago. They played on the bone equipment, laughing and singing, their voices echoing off the stone walls. Among them, I recognized the Morrison children. They were already pale, their eyes already turning black. They waved at me like I was an old friend. A figure emerged from the shadows at the back of the chamber. At first I thought it was another child. Then I got a better look and my stomach turned. She must have been a woman once. Now she was something else. Her skin was gray and stretched tight over her skull. Her dress was tattered and rotting, but I could tell it had once been a teacher's dress from the 1880s. Her fingers were long and bony, ending in yellow nails that looked like claws. "Welcome, Mr. Thornfield," she said. Her voice was dry as old paper. "I'm Miss Abigail Thorne. I was the school teacher here in Bent Creek Settlement." "You died in 1889, I said. My voice didn't sound like my own. "I died," she agreed. "But I didn't leave. The plague came, you see. It killed so many children. They were so afraid. They died crying and alone." Her black eye sockets fixed on me. I couldn't bear it. So I kept them here, safe, where they could play forever and never be afraid again. "You killed them," I said. "I saved them," she hissed. "From suffering, from pain, from death. And I keep collecting more. Every child who comes to this hollow joins our school. We have recess that never ends." Billy walked past me like I wasn't there and joined the other children on the playground. He climbed onto the bone swing and started pumping his legs, laughing. "What did you do to him?" I demanded. "I showed him how to be young again," Miss Thorne said. "Adults carry such heavy burdens, fear, responsibility, regret. I took all that away. Now he's free. Now he can play." She moved closer. In the lantern light, I could see that some of the playground equipment moved on its own. The merry-go-round turned slowly, and I realized the skulls weren't just decorations. They were screaming. Silent, endless screams. "Those are the parents," Miss Thorne explained, following my gaze. "The ones who come looking for their children. They can't play, you see. Adults don't know how. So they become the equipment. They serve a purpose." I thought about the two skeletons in the car, about my grandfather, about all the people who'd vanished in these mountains. My hand went to my belt. Rangers carry lots of equipment, and one thing we carry is iron, railroad spikes for marking trails. My grandfather had taught me something when I was young, something about the old beliefs. Iron and salt could protect you from things that weren't natural. I had a spike, and in my emergency rations, I had salt packets. "I think I'll pass on your playground," I said, backing up slowly. Miss Thorne's face twisted into something that might have been a smile, but looked more like a wound opening. "You don't have a choice, Mr. Thornfield. Recess is over. Time for your lesson." The children stopped playing. They all turned to look at me with their black eyes. Billy was among them, and he didn't recognize me at all. "Time for your lesson on staying forever," Miss Thorne said. Behind me, I heard rock grinding on rock. The cave entrance was sealing itself. I ran, but I wasn't fast enough. A wall of stone closed off my escape. I was trapped in the dark with monsters wearing children's faces. I did the only thing I could think of. I pulled out my salt packets and the iron spike, and I made a circle on the ground around myself. It wasn't much, just a line of salt with the spike driven into the stone at the center. But when the children tried to come closer, they stopped at the line like they'd hit an invisible wall. Miss Thorne shrieked. The sound was like metal scraping on metal, and small stones fell from the ceiling. "You can't hide forever," she screamed. "The salt will scatter, the iron will rust, and then you'll play with us. You'll all play with us." The children began to cry. But their crying wasn't sad. It was angry. Their tears were black, and where the tears hit the ground, the stone cracked. The walls of the chamber started to shake. Miss Thorne changed. Her withered body stretched and twisted. Her fingers grew longer, the nails becoming like knives. Her mouth opened too wide, showing rows of needle teeth. Her eye sockets filled with swirling darkness, like looking into a well with no bottom. She struck at my salt circle. Her claws hit the invisible barrier and sparks flew. The circle held, but barely. Each time she hit it, the protection weakened. I could feel it like a pressure in my chest, getting tighter and tighter. And then she showed me things, visions. My grandfather crying in the dark, calling my name. My mother weeping when they told her they'd never find him. All my fault, the visions whispered. All my fault because I wasn't strong enough, smart enough, good enough. I almost broke. Almost stepped outside the circle. But then I remembered something else my grandfather had taught me. "Ezra," he'd said on one of our last days together, "sometimes letting go is the bravest thing you can do. Sometimes holding on too tight is what causes the pain." I looked at Miss Thorne and understood. She thought she was saving the children, but she'd imprisoned them. She'd kept them from moving on, from finding peace, from being with the families who loved them. "You're not protecting them," I said. "You're hurting them." "I saved them," she shrieked. "You trapped them," I said. I looked past her at all the pale children with their black eyes. "You made them afraid to leave, but they can go. They can be free." I started talking to the children directly. "Your families are waiting," I told them. "They miss you. They never forgot you. It's okay to go home. You don't have to stay here and be afraid." Some of the children stopped crying. Their black eyes flickered, and for just a second I saw normal eyes underneath, blue and brown and green. "Stop it!" Miss Thorne lunged at the circle again. The barrier cracked but held. Billy stood in the crowd of children. For a moment his face showed confusion, adult thoughts trying to surface through whatever spell had been put on him. "Billy," I called. "You're a ranger. Rangers help people. These children need help. They need someone to show them the way out." He blinked. His eyes flickered from black to tea, ear normal brown, and back again. "You're not a child," I said. "You're a man, a good man. Help them." Something broke inside him. I saw it happen. His eyes cleared, staying brown. He looked down at himself in confusion and horror. What did she do to me?" he whispered. Then he looked at the other children and understood. He walked toward them, reaching out his hands. "Come on," he said gently. "I'll show you the way home. It's okay. You're safe now." The children began to move toward him, more and more of them, their eyes clearing, their pale skin warming to normal colors. They held on to Billy's hands, and he led them toward a light that was appearing at the far end of the chamber, a soft, warm light that hadn't been there before. Miss Thorne screamed. The sound was so loud it made my ears ring. The chamber started to collapse. The bone playground fell apart, and the skulls that had been screaming finally went quiet. Parents' bodies appeared where the equipment had been, old bones crumbling to dust, finally at rest. "I only wanted to keep them safe," Miss Thorne wailed. She was shrinking, withering, turning back into what she really was, a dead woman who'd refused to let go. As the last child walked toward the light, Miss Thorne crumbled to dust. The chamber shook hard. Huge cracks appeared in the walls. I grabbed my lantern and ran. The cave system was collapsing, but I followed the light the children had gone toward. It led me to a different exit, a narrow crack in the rock that opened onto the hillside above the hollow. I squeezed through just as tons of rock came crashing down behind me. Dawn was breaking. The sky was pink and gold. I'd been underground all night. I stumbled down the hill on shaking legs. At the cave entrance, the one we'd gone into, I found Billy's body. He was lying peacefully like he'd just gone to sleep. His eyes were closed. His face was calm. I sat down next to him and cried. Over the next few days, search parties found all 3 missing families. The Morrisons were discovered in their tent, where they'd been all along. According to them, they had no memory of the past 3 days. The children were healthy but confused. The other family from the car, turned out they'd been reported missing in 1960. Their children were now adults, found wandering in the forest, aged 30 years in what felt like a few days to them. Nobody could explain it. The doctor said maybe it was some kind of gas leak causing hallucinations. Maybe the families had gotten lost and confused. Maybe a lot of things. I filed my report. Gas leak, hallucinations, exposure. I mentioned that Ranger Billy Sawyer had died heroically trying to save the families. I didn't mention Miss Thorne or the hollow children or the playground made of bones. Who would believe it? The Forest Service designated Bent Creek Hollow as geologically hazardous. They blocked the logging road with concrete barriers and put up warning signs. Officially, it's closed due to unstable cave systems. I requested a transfer to desk work. I couldn't go back out into those mountains. Every time I tried, I'd hear children singing, and my hands would start shaking so bad I couldn't hold my equipment. I still work for the Forest Service, but now I push papers in an office. Sometimes people ask me why I gave up field work. I tell them I got too old for it. They accept that answer. On the anniversary of that night, I always take a drive out toward Bent Creek Hollow. I don't go close, just near enough to see the valley from the ridge. And sometimes, if the wind is right, I hear children laughing, not the hollow, empty laughter of Miss Thorne's prisoners, real laughter, happy and free. Last year I thought I saw figures on the far ridge, children, waving. When I waved back, they were gone. I think about Miss Thorne's final words a lot. I only wanted to keep them safe. That's what she told herself for over 70 years. She thought she was protecting them, but really she was keeping them prisoner. Sometimes I wonder how many of us do the same thing in smaller ways. Hold on too tight to people we love. Keep them close because we're afraid of losing them. Lock them away in comfortable cages and call it safety. The most dangerous places aren't always the ones that look scary. Sometimes they're the ones that promise you'll never have to be afraid again. The ones that say you can stay young forever, that you never have to grow up or face hard truths or let people go. But growth requires risk. Love requires letting go. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is step out of the circle, even when you're terrified of what's waiting in the dark. I pulled 247 people out of these mountains alive over 19 years. I like to think I pulled a few more out that last night in Bent Creek Hollow. Not their bodies, something more important, their souls. Billy's buried in the Ranger Cemetery with full honors. On quiet nights when I can't sleep, I drive out there and tell him about my day. I tell him he was braver than me, braver than most people ever get the chance to be. And sometimes I swear I hear him laugh.